all have, which is positive thinking.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
What an incredible story there of Kuda Biza, who is a co-founder of Nonbelievable. And I guess it's also the power of paying it forward, right? That when you experience good, when good is done unto you, don't let it stop with you. Pay it forward. Do the same unto others. And before you know it, there's just this whole wave of goodness that we can be able to create amongst ourselves as humanity. An absolutely beautiful story there. And Kuda Biza is the co-founder of Nonbelievable. You're listening to The Talking Point. Welcome to the show. I'm Cathy Mohlahlana. As always, I'll be with you until midday. Of course, we'll kick the conversation off with the open line. It is your National Roundtable. I'm getting ready to take your calls on 086 000 2032. That's the number to dial to reach our studio line this morning, 086 000 2032. Remember, you can place whatever matter you feel is of national importance on the National Roundtable. I'll also be taking your WhatsApp voice notes on 0614 104 107. Coming up on the show this morning, we're going to be getting into personal finance with Brian Hirsch in the second hour. It is, of course, a Tuesday, so our programming is pretty much pre-planned. And then the final hour of the show, we're going to be looking at a forum that was recently held, hosted by the National Planning Commission and the International Organization for Migration. And they were looking specifically at migration as a catalyst for development. And, they believe that this is an area that has been underexplored as an opportunity to drive development, particularly on the African continent. We know how much the role of the African diaspora is for the continent, because there's so much money that is sent back to the continent by those that are working elsewhere in the world. And all of this, in fact, actually outpaces the amount of aid that Africa receives on an annual basis. And that migration forum was basically highlighting then some of the opportunities that it believes migration presents. And I know that you talk migration, you talk opportunities in a country like South Africa, most people, or let me not say most people, but you're certainly going to have some people that want to stand up and disagree because of how we are experiencing some of the challenges that have been brought on by not only migration, I believe, but by a whole host of other issues. And so we'll be having that conversation and unpacking it with the Deputy Chairperson of the National Planning Commission in the final hour of the show. Of course, I am taking your calls on 086 000 2032. One of the things that I wanted to talk about this morning, or I thought we could have just an open conversation around this issue. And it's largely because on a platform like SAFM, we have the opportunity of speaking to the country. And that means that there are things that are happening in parts of the country that I might not be aware of, that my team might not be aware of, but that you as South Africans experience, deal with, interact with on a day-to-day basis. And I saw a story, and it was a response to a parliamentary question that was asked to the Home Affairs Minister, and this is it was a question asked by the EFF to the Home Affairs Minister around fraud and corruption in the Home Affairs Department, and basically what is being done to address fraud and corruption. And part of the answer that was given by the Home Affairs Minister, Leon Schreiber, to the question was a detailed breakdown of what the department had been doing to fight corruption. And he lists all of the cases. There's about 109 cases that have been reported that are currently under investigation. But it's also in some of the details that he gave that stayed with me. Because just last month, when the issue of Chidima Adesina made international headlines, literally, over how her mother had allegedly bought her identity document, etc., etc. One of the points I made at the time is we have to sit and think about the officials on a day-to-day basis at Home Affairs who enable corruption. And those officials are South Africans, right, by and large, because, they're working for the public service, and the public service prioritizes hiring South African nationals. And what accountability do we then, as South Africans, place at our own door for the high levels of corruption? So coming back to the answers, to the minister's answer to the parliamentary question, part of what he said in there is that the corruption that they have identified include, the sale of passports, where somebody can buy a passport for 45,000 rand, or you can buy a birth certificate for 1,000 rand. He also talks about what is known as photo swaps, passport photo swaps, which effectively is you have an official from the Department of Home Affairs, you have a South African, and then you have a foreign national who is buying this fraudulent passport. They all go to the Home Affairs Department together, and much of this, according to the minister's explanation, happens in the dead of night, right? And the South African then would have applied for the passport, but when the picture is taken, the foreign national is the one who has their picture taken and using then the identity of the South African. And all of this is enabled by corruption, because monies are paid for this to happen. But you see how it's a full chain. You need a lot of people involved. A lot of people must know about what is happening, and they must turn a blind eye to what is happening in order for it to continue to happen. And it just had me thinking about bribery and corruption, and what public services are people actually paying for? I would like to know, what are the public services that people are paying for? And which departments are the corrupt departments? Which departments do you think actually are the most corrupt? If this can happen at Home Affairs, what else are people paying for when they're trying to access services? The bribery. Or do we not see it as bribery anymore because of how much of a culture has been created around it? So that's why I say, let's have an open conversation. Have there been services recently that you have bribed an official for? What were those services? Which department? You don't have to tell me their names. You should take that to the police if you want to report them and open a case. But it's more of an information finding exercise, because I'm just curious about the extent and the levels of corruption that actually exist when it comes to some of the public services that we receive, but also how is this corruption sometimes playing itself out? Maybe you can give me a bit of insight into that. Even if it's not you, maybe it's your friend or friend of a friend or somebody down the road from you that you heard. I'd love to hear some of those experiences. I'll take your calls on 086 000 2032 is the number to dial. On the WhatsApp voice note line, 0614 104 107.
The cost of living crisis is real. Here's what one Outsurance client did about it.
I'm Amy. I'm 26 from Kenilworth. When I got my 2022 Ford EcoSport, the immediate thought was to buy an Outsurance, and I pay only 819 Rand per month. No insurers were able to beat or match the premium that I'm currently paying.
Want a car insurance premium that will blow your mind? SMS out to 30754 now. That's out to 30754. Outsurance is a licensed insurer and FSP. T's and C's online.
Comoros and the Gambia have a huge clash for 90 minutes in the AFCON qualifier. Both nations are optimistic for the significant 3 points. Yet the question remains, who wants it the most? This is the Total Energies 2025 Africa Cup of Nations qualifier. Witness the beauty of African football. Comoros up against the Gambia on Wednesday, 4 September at 5 p.m. Live at your fingertips on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Here, there, and everywhere. SAFM 105.8 FM in Knysna.
Play Powerball for an estimated 78 million rand and Powerball Plus for an estimated 22 million rand this Tuesday. That's right, 100 million rand in total estimated Powerball and Powerball Plus jackpots are waiting to be won. Buy your tickets now in store on nationallottery.co.za, the mobile app, cell phone banking app, or simply dial *120*7529# for USSD. Panda Pusha Play. Players must be 18 years or older. Play responsibly. Ituba is the proud operator of the National Lottery.
Hashtag SAFM Talking Point.
All right, let's get straight then into the open line, taking your calls on 086 000 2032. I'm going to begin in Cape Town. Sia, good morning.
Good morning, Sis Cathy. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Thanks for responding to my question. I see you want to talk about the issue of buying services.
Yes, and it really is. We've become a rotten country because even services that we need, we buy for everything. Here in Cape Town, there are places where you know that if you need a driving license, no matter how good and how prepared you are, if you don't pay, they will fail you. So you have to pay in some of the testing centers for your driving license. And it really is absurd.
You know, Sia, I feel like the issue of driving licenses is one that has just been allowed to... The corruption is actually at levels that are just unfathomable. And there's no will to actually do anything about it, right? Because how many exposés have been done on the licensing officials, on the driving centres, etc. And yet it continues. And unfortunately, people often feel like they don't have a choice but to pay because they need the license.
Mm-hmm. Now there's a new trend, besides the one that we normally know of paying traffic officials and stuff. Now, Foreign Nationals has taken it upon themselves to work with some. They work with traffic officials. You don't even go to a testing center. You just provide them with your full details, and then within a week you have your driving license, irrespective of the code. And then you just pay. If you want a code 8, code 10, code 14, you just pay the respective amounts, and then they bring you the driving license. The comfort of your home.
Yeah. You don't even have to show up at the licensing center.
Not at all. That's how things are.
Oh, that is so dangerous. That is so dangerous.
And I know a lot of people, because I'm told it happens in Joburg as well. You just have to go to the license center just to sign for your driving license, and then you take it and then you leave again. So that's all you need to do. You pay, you give them your details, and then come collection time, you go to a particular testing center, you just sign for your driving license, and then you take it back home.
See, isn't that terrifying when you think about the fact that driving is a skill that you need in order to not only keep yourself safe, but to keep other people
Others
safe?
as well.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And it's very common to code 14 drivers because they are in demand. So there are a lot of employment opportunities for truck drivers. So it really is normal. And then you ask yourself, one asks themselves that, okay, there's a rapid rise in reckless and negligent driving from the truck drivers. I wonder if that doesn't have an impact.
Okay. Sia in Cape Town, thanks for the call. Yeah, licensing departments. I had actually forgotten about the amount of corruption that we have in licensing. And he's not the only one that's raising it. Zonda in Soweto is saying, good morning, Cathy. The traffic department is the most corrupt. It's bribery every day from street to learners, and 2,000 to 2,500 Rand bribery on testing day for license in partnership with all driving schools. That's what you get. The ANC government. All right. That's another view there. Somebody else says, hi, Cathy. I just go to Randburg Licensing Department to see how Zimbabweans are running the show in terms of traffic fines and license applications, KFK, in Morningside. Okay, so the licensing department is coming up then quite a bit in the first couple of minutes of the open line. Anonymous, you want to talk about buying services as well. You're out in KZN. Good morning. Yeah, Pila Anonymous?
Yeah, Peter, I'm going to try to speak with this English. To me, this English is a foreign language as well, but I'm going to try. My sister, I work at Mpumalanga at Millspruit, right? At Millspruit, I'm working together in one company with these guys that are coming from other countries outside. These guys, they buying IDs, driver's license, and passport. I don't want to mention people's name, but this thing is happening, and it's happening openly at Millspruit. I don't know, but I think the police and the Home Affairs, they are allowing it to happen, because one guy, which is a South African guy, he tried to go and open the case for these guys, the foreigners at the police station, and these guys, which is the foreigners, they ended up knowing who told the cops about these things, which means if you go and tell the police about what is wrong that is happening, the police go around and tell that person what you have told them about. So people are afraid, even me too. I know I can give you the name of the guy that bought an ID, but now the problem is if I give my name and I give my number, he will end up knowing that it is me.
And then, Anonymous, what happens when they know it's you? So is it a case of that they intentionally go out and start threatening people? Or what happens? Because, of course, nobody should feel ashamed that they did the right thing.
It's clear, sister. Once they know that it is you, you want this thing to be free at the end of the day. You will always be scared. You don't know what is going to happen. Sometimes to some other people, something happens. Maybe to some other people, it doesn't happen, but it's obvious. There will be something that will follow you. Yeah.
And Anonymous, do they buy it as a package? Is it a package deal? So, because you mentioned IDs, passports, licenses, is it a one-stop shop where they go to an official in the municipality or at one of the departments and they're able to facilitate getting all of these documents?
No, each department has got its own person. Like you see now, I've got a VN that I have. Whereby I was speaking with the guy, and we were speaking about this thing of the ID, which is the foreigner. He was going to buy it, and he bought it, and they gave him the price. The price is about 10,000 Rand. As of now, as I'm speaking, that guy has got the ID, and is busy with the license, and is busy with the passport, and he's a Zimbabwean.
Sure. All right. Okay. All right. Anonymous. Thanks for calling in with that information. Anonymous out in KZN, but as you heard, he usually works and lives in Mpumalanga, and he's talking about what he's seen, where he's from. I'm going to continue taking your calls, 086 000 2032. Let's have an open and honest conversation about this. We need to know what is happening in our country. It's 9:30.
Good morning. In the headlines, ANC Secretary General Fikile Mbalula says the party will engage the SACP General Secretary Solima Pahila on comments he made on a podcast where he accused party president Cyril Ramaphosa of leading a neoliberalist faction within the ANC. The Pretoria High Court has ordered the Department of Employment and Labour to immediately suspend a contractor running the department's UIF online services. As a result, the UIF online platforms are not available until further notice. And Ugandan athlete Rebecca Cheptegei, who competed in last month's Paris Olympics, is in a critical condition at a Kenyan hospital after allegedly being set on fire by her former boyfriend. I'll have details on these and other stories at 10.
It is Game On!
Game on!
It is where the real lovers of the game dive deep into detail of the upcoming local and international fixtures. Join us on Game On as Mr. Sizwe, Click Click Bang Mabena and the legends zoom closer to the thrilling performance of the pitch personnel.
How was your favorite team's performance?
Find out on Game On every Saturday at 2 p.m. on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available at your fingertips on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com.
SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Here, there, and everywhere. SAFM 105.9 FM in Port Elizabeth. Hashtag SAFM Talking Point.
Good morning, Sis Cathy, and all the listeners of SAFM. I'd like to thank President Ramaphosa to respond to this thing of always we are shouting about let's stop these protection fees and extortion. At least the President is responding now. Thank you very much, President. And also, I'd like to thank Minister of Police. He's doing a great job. I wish them all the best in life. Thank you.
Morning, Cathy. This country will not progress because of a lot of political parties, tribalism, racism. I think Bhutana, Kabel from Durban, and Vusa from Parktown, they can form their new party. I want to see them. Regarding crime, let's not make prisons universities. And now the universities are breweries in these days, no longer universities. Thank you, Cathy.
Cathy, hello. I'm people anonymous in King Williamstown. Cathy, I've just been stopped right now by the taxi operators telling us that we can on a scholar on a work transport lift. We had a work transport lift when going to work. So we were told that we can't have more than 5 people in a car. I don't know who gave them to say that other people should go and take the taxi. I don't know who gave them the right to tell us who is supposed to have on our cars and who are not supposed to have on our cars. Because we're going to the same work. Why would other people have to take the taxi and other people take the car when we're going to the same work? Just wanted to tell the operators that it's not right what they are doing. I know that you've talked about this for a long period of time. You brought the representatives and what were the COSAT, the Santaco and the government. So I just want to tell the operators it's not right what they are doing, because now they stopped us. We had to wait for a lot of time answering them.
Hashtag SAFM Talking Point.
We continue the conversation on the talking point. Thanks for those WhatsApp voice notes. Of course, I'm still taking your calls, 086 000 2032. On the WhatsApp voice note line, 0614 104 107. I asked a question about corruption, bribery, and, buying services. What services are people paying bribes for? Which departments, in your view, then, are also the most corrupt departments? Yeah, I must tell you, some of the answers have been really extraordinary. Somebody says, Cathy, all departments are corrupt. We have many people here in Burgersfort that are getting a disability grant, but they're not disabled. Doctors are at the center of this fraud. He also says, I'm also guilty. I bribed to get my license. That message there from Anonymous. Lirotodi in Johannesburg. Good morning.
Cathy, how are you?
Well, thank you, Lirotodi. Go for it.
Yes, Cathy. Now, what I can tell you, Cathy, it's like each and every department in South Africa, there's corruption there. Let me start with this one. I'm going to talk about the people called law enforcement and the judiciary. Let me start with the enforcement. Look, Cathy, who helped Bushira to escape South Africa? Is it the intelligence and the president? I'm saying the president because by then Bushira escaped South Africa. It was a corona, Cathy. It was no movement. Even the president themselves, they were talking via Skype. By that time, since Bushira cried to his president, Chakwera organized a fake state visit to Cyril Ramaphosa to come to South Africa during that corona time. Chakwera arrived here, meet Ramaphosa. Once Chakwera left South Africa, tomorrow morning, Bushira report in Malawi saying, I'm in Malawi, report in the Facebook. Everybody sees that. Clearly, for me, I'm still saying the president helped Bushira to escape South Africa with his intelligence. I'm done with that one, Cathy. Let me go to this second one again in law enforcement. We as South Africans, we still want the answer from the South African Army General to tell us who authorized, who is that person, who authorized the Gupta's flight to land Waterkloof Army Base. Who is that person? We are waiting that answer from South African Defense Force because there's no one who can tell us. So now, I'm done. Let me lastly, Cathy, for judiciary. We have a weakest judiciary in South Africa. Number one, if Cathy, someone you have to be investigated. We are Oscar Mabuyan. You go to court and preventing you to be investigated. What is this? Who are you cannot be investigated? Because if you are calling yourself law enforcement, you don't have to beg me to investigate me. You have to investigate me. The same as Nosivia Mapisa Nakula. That was my point on corruption.
Okay, all right, Lirotodi, thanks for that. Yeah, I think at that time it was called the Great Escape, right? How Bushiri managed to get out of South Africa in the midst of all of the controversy that was unfolding around him. And of course, much of what Lirotodi is saying is, publicly available information. And I guess he's saying, well, corruption actually also needs to be looked at the national level. Look, Lirotodi, I think we also talk about so much of the corruption that is happening, at a high level involving, whether it's your ministers and leaders of political parties and organizations. But I want to know, for the purposes of this particular conversation, what's happening on the ground? Maputi, you're in Gauteng. Good morning. Hello, Maputi.
Yes, Cathy.
Yes.
Yeah, regarding this selling of services, before 1994, by then it was white people leading this country. And now it's our black brothers leading this country. They're copying this from the regime, earlier apartheid, Cathy. And the reason, you'll ask for the reason, they will tell you because of money and all that. Now we have to come with a solution, Cathy. these people should be arrested. When you look at your calls, most of the people that are being calling, you will never get a call no, experience is this. We used to do 1, 2, 3. Now the minister, it's a white guy. How did he come to this? Because of experience. This thing, so the solution like those whites, this corruption, but they are copying it. It's heartbreaking. Cathy,
yeah,
on your call, I'm still listening. They used to do this in the apartheid. Now, but we are not copying. Because we are also hungry. Now, because
Maputi, I have no doubt that the apartheid government was corrupt to the core. You just have to look at apartheid as a system, right, in order to be able to see that. It doesn't need any more convincing than that. We are now 30 years into democracy. Can we really excuse corrupt behavior by saying, is that relevant for today?
You know what, Cathy? Even lawyers, Rona, they are using us. They give us this position. But when coming to the main thing, let's go to finance. Go to all these departments. Whites are the ones. Rona, it's like we don't have control. And who is about to that's why but babang desperate. These whites are using us. Go to the municipality. Go check. Even their accounts. Go to ESCOM. Go check. When their accounts, you will never find. Let's say this, Cathy. When coming to the system of reading our electricity, our people are baba with peanuts. The whites are, it's I'm saying it because of experience. We tried to make our leaders, but unfortunately, is hearing now. But rather you'll end up in trouble. You'll end up in trouble. The whites, they are laughing. They are laughing at us. They are laughing at us. It's going to go back to them again. It's going to go back to them because that's Fantakaro.
Okay, Maputi, that's Maputi's view in Gauteng. I wonder what you make of that. I don't agree with everything she said because at the end of the day, individuals must take responsibility for their own actions. We can't absolve ourselves of responsibility. We can't scapegoat. If there's a young child, we got a message from Soweto, right? Yazonde, who sent a message about the monies that are being paid for getting a license. He said between 2,000 and 2,500 rand. Where is a white person involved in that? Because that money is being paid. It's exchanging hands there in the streets of Soweto. So we have to take responsibility. Robert, you're out in Durban. Good morning.
Morning, Cathy. Yeah, I'm trying to agree with you that last caller's conspiracies are so skewed, man. And you can't be blaming white people now for our black corruption. I'm a black person. I'm as black as a space of 8 spades. I want to agree with you with your comment that you made, that there is no political will to solve any corruption. And I'll tell you why. Because with the driving license issue, I checked an official and a driving school. I went to register the notes before I paid them. And I went to the police station and I told him what's going on. They want my niece to pay for the license. and I'm not prepared to pay for it. So this is what I'm doing. I need you to accompany me because I'm going to pay this money over. They accompanied me. They sat a little distance away. I paid the guy the money. She went in and did the test. She wasn't even there 2 or 3 minutes. Got out of there, got a license, passed and all that. And I said, now go and search that guy. He's got the money. They went, they searched the guy. They got all the money. Took him to the police station. Cut a long story short, I've never ever heard a word from them where this case was going on. And I must come there as a witness. They still had the 2,500 rand I paid. And I actually had to send them letters of demand to get my money back from them because this case was going nowhere. Now,
Robert, did you actually send the letter of demand?
Yeah, I sent a letter of demand. I threatened the area commissioner. I threatened the national commissioner. But that money is sitting
somewhere as evidence, Mus. It's in a bag, it's sealed.
Yeah, it's they're in a police station somewhere, all registered notes. All the numbers were registered. I eventually got a call from a lieutenant. I don't know if he's a provincial lieutenant. And, we apologize, Mr. Green, for not getting back to you, this and that. But you can come and collect the money. Zero about the case. Nothing about the case. I went as a matter of interest to go and check these officials there again. I see they're still there. Now, here's the deal with them. Now, I'll give you a scenario here in Durban. You've got 8 officials, 8 road license testing inspectors. They take you out to drive. Now, each one of them, I did a bit of research on it. Each one of them get about 6 to 8 appointments a day. And if they reject 4 out of that 8, they clock 1,500 rand a pass. That's what they get. And this was last year. Last year they were coining 1,500 rand each. So they were getting 6,000 rand a day. And you got to see how these people are dressed. Stylish hairs and eau de colognes and those perfumes you can't afford. You can't even imagine how much they cost. Yeah. Manicured to the T, and they're just like purdies, just modeling around there, and they are milking. But here's the deal: if like you said, if there was a political will to stop this, they could have eliminated the third person and let everybody apply online for licensing, like they're starting to do with the IDs. But there's no political will.
Look, Robert, it also seems like there's a way in which the online system can be infiltrated too. Ask the people possibly, in Johannesburg and in Gauteng that use the online system. So it's not fault-proof either. Yeah. Yeah,
but the sad thing is, Cathy, we can speak as much as we want to until we're blue in the face. It's so pandemic and it's so deep-rooted. They're not even going to make a dent with it. The other one is we have a contracting company. When we got to get our invoices released from the municipality, because we do works for public works and stuff like that, a clerk will phone you from the other side and say, listen, Robert, we have your invoice here at X amount. I'm going to send it for final signature. Let's talk. And they'll talk to you brazenly like that. Let's say your invoice is worth 5 million or 3 million or whatever it is. We can talk, just put a small cold drink gift there in the account, send you the account number. And otherwise this guy's going to delay it and mess your capital flow up. So he wants 5 grand. You got to deposit the 5 grand. 10 grand, depends on the amount. You got to deposit the 10 grand in
order
account.
To release the invoice payment.
Yeah, to release the invoice payment. Yeah, I did that. Because I was hard pressed for this money that he was holding. And he says immediately after it's paid, the money reflects in your account.
Sure, Robert. Yeah.
Hey.
Thank you for calling in and for sharing your story, sharing your experience. What do you make of that? And I guess in all things glass full, half empty, I guess he got his money back, got the 2,500 rand back. But he went to the police with full evidence of what is happening. I see quite a number of messages also coming up in terms of SASSA. I'll read those shortly. Anonymous says, Cathy, I work in the government space. Corruption is endemic and mostly influenced by the private sector. Target the corrupter and see how fast it will subside. That sector has perfected stealing. Well, Anonymous, call in. Tell us more. I want to know more. How has the the private sector perfected corruption, and why do you think it's the root or the source of the corruption? Sitle Zondi at Giga Joe in Pietermaritzburg says, hi Cathy, here in Pietermaritzburg at Mkondeni testing station, whether you are good or bad, you must pay 1,500 Rand to get your license. That's one view there. Somebody else says, I'm looking for a message. We got a message that was talking about the border post and how one should actually just go. There we go. Here it is. Cathy, during the pension payments of SASSA, just go to our border posts and check how many foreigners from Lesotho, Swaziland, Mozambique, and Zimbabwe are coming to collect pension payments and child grants. We've got a couple of messages talking about the SASSA payments as well. Let me go to Errol. Errol, you're in KZN. Good morning.
Hello.
Hi, Errol.
Hello, it's Alan here. Hello, Cathy. Greetings to you.
Yes.
My name is Alan.
Alan. All right. Apologies, Alan. Good morning.
Good morning. I'd like to speak about corruption in science. It goes back many years, and it's an international problem. I'll start off with soap. A very simple thing. The World Health Organization tells us to wash our hands with soap, which is absolutely correct. The point about soap is that it's got one sodium atom and 3 hydroxides. The sodium breaks the dirt off the hands, and the hydroxides break up fat. And all germs and all viruses and all pollen have got fat, so it breaks up this fat. But now the oldest soap in the world is made up of one sodium atom, one hydroxide, and one carbon, and it's called sodium bicarbonate. And many million years ago, Mother Nature gave all vertebrates a pancreas, which makes insulin to control sugar, and it also makes sodium bicarbonate. It has many uses, but let me just concentrate on soap. So when we put the soap or this sodium bicarbonate permeates all our mucus, and when we chew food, the sodium bicarbonate in the saliva mixes in food and we break down fat. It's the first stage of digestion. But more important, especially after the last 5 years, mucus in the nose is full of bicarbonate of soda. And it breaks down the fat of the viruses and the bacteria and the pollen, and they are destroyed within minutes. Unfortunately, sometimes we are short of sodium bicarbonate, and the nasal passages are ideal incubating places for these pathogens. So if we just put a pinch of bicarbonate of soda in each nostril, it will increase the sodium bicarbonate concentration throughout all our mucosa and destroy these pathogens, which cause 99% of all diseases downstream of the nose. It's a simple chemical reaction that sanitizes the body long before the immune system kicks in. Of course, the other advantage is that these bacteria and viruses cannot spread from one person to another. The contagion stops. And yet, all the medical emphasis has been on infections after the nose for the past 200 years. And for the last 5 years, I've been speaking to the Department of Health, all the universities, and I never get an adequate reply. They never want to talk to me. Now, we've done more than 20,000 doses here in the Winterton area, and we've neutralized so many problems like sinus, TB, COVID, herpes simplex, meningitis, encephalitis, viral deafness, polio virus, mpox, and none of these people want to talk to us. Like last week, I spoke to the Medical Research Council. I wrote to them. I said mosquitoes are attracted to infections in the nose because we've done it here when we've got children and babies that have got infections. We put the bicarb on the rim of the nose. They don't even have to sniff it in. It kills the infection, and there are no more mosquitoes. And yet, we get no reply from the medical people. And this is an international problem.
Look,
and I mean,
Alan, I think that the best that we can do for you is get you in touch with some of the medical associations that we interact with regularly on the show. I would especially also want to do it because now that this information is out there, you've given people some ideas. And what we don't want is to create a situation where, of course, people are taking on this advice as you have given it, because then it actually needs to be tested. So I would very much also want to hear from some of your colleagues within the medical space around some of the ideas that you have shared. So I'm going to put you through to Kanya, and hopefully we'll be able to have more of a conversation around what Alan is saying. And please, this is not medical advice that has been sponsored. It is the open line, so anybody is welcome to call in. Unfortunately, I can't comment on what Alan is saying because I'm not qualified to do that. Only those in the medical field will be able to either agree or disagree. Anonymous, you're calling us from Engcobo, from the Eastern Cape. Good morning. You want to talk about Engcobo municipality?
Thank you, Cathy. There is a lot of problems which I want to speak about regarding the municipality of Dr. A.P. Koma under Chris Hani district. We've been having problems such as water crisis. We do not have water into that municipality, basically to the rural areas. We have a problem of employment. We have a problem of an increase to the crime. And we also have a problem of hospitals which are not functional. So if I can explain it further, the roads, they are deteriorating. A road which you used to drive in that road from Clarkbury to Nkondlo, you'll be driving for 30 minutes. But today you can take more than 2 hours driving to that road because the road is like it's a damaged road. I can put it that way. And if you check the employment, if we talk about employment, the employment.
Hello, Anonymous?
Yes, I'm still here, Kathy.
Look.
No, if you talk about employment, we have a problem of young people who are not employed, young people who have tend to use drugs. And we've been writing to the mayor, Mr. Zanga. He cares less about that.
Okay.
And what we hear is
Anonymous,
yes.
Let me do this.
Yes.
This sounds like one of those matters that will be perfect for us to take up during Municipal Watch. So I'm going to put you through to Kanya. And she will take down all of these details. We'll see if we can't focus on your municipality in one of the slots for Municipal Watch. Sam in Johannesburg, you'll be a final caller for this hour. Good morning, Sam.
Morning, Casey. How are you, Sis Casey?
Doing good, thank you. Go for it.
I'm a first-time caller. I'm a bit nervous.
Welcome to the show, Sam. No need for you to be nervous.
Yes, Sis Casey.
Go ahead.
Casey, the other day you invited the former Minister of Home Affairs, Dr. Aaron Mjali. I couldn't get through, and I've got a problem with Home Affairs. They blocked my ID. Now they want to pay bribery. I don't know what to do. They want my mother. My mother passed away a long time ago, 1975.
What do you mean they want you to pay bribes? What happened? Who asked you for a bribe?
The officials there, Home Affairs, they said if you want to open your ID, you must give 10,000. The following day, someone says give 6,000. The following, give me 12,000. Before they can open my ID, because they said my ID is duplicate. They have to close one and they leave the other.
Do you have evidence of these officials asking you for this money, Sam?
Yes, I'm not going there anymore because they chased me away now. I don't have their names, but I can see them when I go there. I can see them, but I don't know their name.
Which ID, which Home Affairs office did you use?
Receipt Home Affairs, Johannesburg.
Okay. Sam, we'll follow up on this issue and find out what exactly is happening. Okay. Sam out in Johannesburg. Duplicate IDs. There you go. Give us money. We'll close one of them down. The other concern is, of course, where is this other ID? What is it getting up to in your name? What is it getting up to in your name? It's 10 o'clock. Time for the latest news.
In our top stories, Mbalula reflects on remarks by Solly Mapahila and Twala brothers to appear in court on robbery and theft charges. Good morning. The ANC Secretary General Fikile Mbalula says the party will engage the SACP's General Secretary Solly Mapahila on the comments he made on a podcast where he accused party President Cyril Ramaphosa of leading a neoliberalist faction within the ANC. Mapahila, who has been highly critical of the Government of National Unity, also told the podcast the GNU was a betrayal of the people and was giving him sleepless nights. Mbalula briefed the media at the ANC's headquarters in Johannesburg.
So we will debate neoliberalism with Comrade Solly, and there is nothing wrong with that. But if Comrade Solly then goes and label us and say we're neoliberals and our president is leading a big faction, we will resist that. There is no faction in the ANC. The dominant idea that wins the day, it is out of a rigorous process of engagement. GNU was not imposed in the NEC, it was debated.
Music legend Sello Chikotwala's sons are expected to appear in the Randburg Magistrates Court north of Johannesburg today. Sello and Longwe Twala were arrested after their father opened a case of robbery and theft against them at the Douglasdale police station. He accuses them of stealing his studio equipment at his home in Fourways in Johannesburg. Chikotwala elaborates.
Case of the helper actually witnessed longer taking out some boxes, running away. So, yeah, I mean, it's his life. He's been doing that for some time. It's not something new to actually maintain his drug lifestyle. Besides, Sello does not take drugs. I don't know what got into him. He lied to me, Sello. I only heard that they colluded when Longo was arrested. So I had to ask the police to arrest both of them.
The Pretoria High Court has ordered the Department of Employment and Labour to immediately suspend a contractor running the department's UIF online services. As a result, the UIF online platforms are not available until further notice. In a statement, the department says the platforms affected include e-filing, unstructured supplementary service data, virtual offers, as well as the COVID-19 TERS system. The department spokesperson Tebogo Tejane.
Minister Math welcomes the judgment and wishes to assure UIF clients and stakeholders that capacity at UIF service points will be ramped up and operating hours extended to ensure that all applications and submissions are processed timelessly. We are anticipating that the disruption will result in increased volumes of clients at our service points.
The African Transformation Movement, ATM, has called on government to waive taxes on the pension fund withdrawals. The two-part retirement system came into effect on the 1st of September. The party also wants government to reconsider the 30,000 rand cap on withdrawals, as they say this limit could exacerbate financial struggles for debt-burdened workers. ATM spokesperson Zamanchon.
If you are closer to your threshold in terms of the tax bracket, when you add this on top of this, in just 12 months' time, it would have pushed you out of the current tax bracket and it introduces you to the next one, and therefore even your taxes are going to increase. So for us as the African Transformation Movement, we do not see how that is going to assist. So this is one of the ways we can alleviate workers from this challenge, the burden that comes with the tax and the fees of transferring this money would actually leave them at no better state than they were before.
The Basic Education Minister, Siviwe Pakgobe, says an analysis needs to be done to see where the government shortcomings are in terms of budgets in order to save teaching jobs. The Western Cape Department of Education announced they'll be shedding over 2,000 jobs due to budget cuts from national government. Pakgobe says discussions are underway.
So what I have done is I have requested the DG to immediately put together a team of all the HODs in the provinces so they can do an analysis of where are their problems, where are their shortcomings, where are their shortfalls in terms of budgets, so that we can take that case to National Treasury and say to Treasury, tough choices must be made. But we cannot have a situation where we are not being able to employ thousands of teachers in the system.
And finally, Ugandan athlete Rebecca Cheptegei is in a critical condition at a Kenyan hospital. Cheptegei, who competed in last month's Paris Olympics, suffered burns to over 75% of her body after allegedly being doused with petrol by her former boyfriend. The BBC's Meta Tsikrika has more on it.
The marathon runner is fighting for her life, having suffered burns to over 75% of her body. Police said she was attacked at her Kenyan home in Endebess, where she has been training. Her former boyfriend, who also sustained serious burns, is the main suspect. He allegedly poured petrol on Cheptegei, but also caught fire when he lit the match. Neighbors extinguished the flames and got the couple to hospital. The athlete finished 44th in the women's marathon at the Paris Olympics.
Recapping the top story, the ANC Secretary General Fikile Mbalula says the party will engage the SACP General Secretary Solly Mapaila on comments he made on a podcast where he accused party president Cyril Ramaphosa of leading a neoliberalist faction within the ANC. For SAFM News, I am Anne Musa.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday. The Full Circle with Bridget Masinga.
What were some of the most alarming or concerning findings from the studies, Doc?
We found that over 80% of the children in the cohort had been exposed to some form of violence. This, for me, is something that was quite shocking because, we tend to think, our children are protected or, only adults are being affected by these kinds of things. But finding that, before they, when they even just to learn to speak and walk, and they're already knowing and being exposed to so much terrible things. And what I mean by any kind of violence, I mean things like witnessing people being stabbed or themselves being shouted at, themselves being hit, or witnessing, intimate partner violence.
Dr. Lucinda Tsunga, PhD graduate.
The Full Circle with Bridget Masinga, Monday to Friday, 1 to 3 p.m. Hashtag SAFM Talking Point.
All right, we continue the conversation then on the Talking Point. Welcome to the second hour of the show, 8 after 10 o'clock. Thank you for all your contributions to the open line. Lots of WhatsApp messages and voice notes that I think are also really helpful, just in terms of helping us get a picture of what is happening. And there are things, listen to this message from Anonymous. I don't know how true a message like this is, but one also has to think, well, why would somebody make this up? It says, morning, corruption also happens at medical schools at our universities, where there are limited entry spots that are sold around 350,000. And this individual says it's high-income people and also Indian people that are culprits because they're able to pay. That's the allegation that is being made by this listener. There are also others that have spoken about corruption in the education department, how people pay for posts, people who are not qualified to get certain posts, and they pay to get those posts. Says this is rife in the education sector. If you saw some of the messages that are coming in, I think the reality is we have such endemic corruption when it comes, unfortunately, to whether it's public service, whether it's the private sector. At some point, we have to decide whether it bothers us enough to do something about it, or if we're just so comfortable with the levels of corruption that exist that we are not going to change the status quo. Because it's here in black and white. And thank you to all of our listeners also that called in to share their experiences. We'll take a couple of your WhatsApp voice notes, and then we're talking finance with Brian Hirsch.
Cathy and the listeners, 7 testing traffic officers in Kailicha were caught without the driving licenses, but they were testing people, and they've been doing that for years. This country, there's a lot. These people, they must work on. It's filthy. Anonymous, Cape Town.
Good morning, Katie. I failed to get the driver license 3 times because I didn't pay a bribe. Not because of I can't drive, because I can't pay a bribe. The 4th time, yes, I did pay, and then I got it. So crime. I'm a truck driver. In Cape Town, one of my colleagues gave a lift to somebody, and then he wanted to bribe the traffic police officers. He was arrested. He was there by Kraaifontein police station for the whole weekend because of he wanted to bribe. Cape Town is completely different. Here in Joburg, it's bad, Baba. It's bad. In Cape Town, you cannot bribe there. I'm telling you. Thanks, Katie.
Morning, Sis Cathy. This is Anonymous from Polokwane. Sis Cathy, it's painful. The other day I was in a taxi, and this other lady, she just boarded a taxi next to a primary school. This lady was talking on the phone. She was telling another lady how she got her diploma, so that lady can also get the diploma. Apparently, these people, there is someone who is writing for them. They are doing the assignments and everything, and during the exams they are also paying people who are writing the exam for them so that they can get the qualification. So I was so shocked to realize that there are people who are going to school. I mean, we have children who are going to school. Then later we complain that our kids are not being taught correctly. Reason being, people are buying certificates, even the teacher certificates. I mean, I was so disappointed. Thanks.
Talking Finance with Brian Hirsch, making sense of your finance.
If you have a life insurance but you are smoking weed only, do they consider you as a smoker or a non-smoker?
He wants to know that if you smoke weed, marijuana.
But I can tell you, if you tell the insurance company, I don't smoke, but I smoke weed and marijuana, I think they may either load you or decline you.
I know why, man? Yeah, hey, cause I'm high. Are you really high though, man? He really is high, man.
Well, I can confirm he's absolutely not high, and I hope he didn't buy his qualifications. I know he didn't buy his qualifications. Brian Hirsch, good morning.
Good morning to you. And I can tell you one thing, and I've got this on authority.
Yes.
If you don't smoke weed or marijuana, you can't get insurance. Because they're worried that you're not going to live long enough. Okay. Oh, that advert's got to go. That advert, that jingle's got to go. Got to go.
Oh man, oh Brian, that was a good one. That was a good one. Please do not take that advice.
Yeah.
Do not take his advice.
That's probably the worst advice I've given in 30 years.
All right, Brian, good to have you in studio.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Yeah,
good morning.
Yeah.
Okay, so today it's the. What is it? The 3rd of September.
It is.
It is the 3rd of September. So you and I have been talking about the 1st of September coming, and my word, now that it's here, everybody is talking about the two-part system and getting their hands on their money, and everybody wants a piece of their money. But they're complaining about tax and, is there some grand conspiracy behind being allowed to take the money but not have our hands on all of it? I think we have to go back to the beginning, Brian, and maybe remind people of how this conversation started and how we ended up with the two-pot system in the first place.
Well, going back many years, and I'm even going back 10 years, when the dispensation of the Pensions Act was mooted to be changed, and there was enormous conflict in South Africa because the one big change was preservation. Preservation, that when you left your employee, when you either were retrenched or you resigned, when you left your employee, you were not able to take your pension money. And funnily enough, the two-pot system has brought about that dispensation, because all future monies after the 1st of September will now, for younger people under the age of 55, will be deferred, and people will not be able to withdraw. So the compensating factor was there are so many South Africans earning lower amounts of money, because I can tell you now, for those who are paying high rates of tax, do not even think about the two-pot system. For the reason is you're only entitled to 30,000 Rand, which is the maximum of 10% of the value of your fund as at the 31st of August, which is called the vested pot, and from that you can take 10% one-off up to a maximum of 30,000, and that relates to all funds you have. So let's talk about majority of people work for one company, but they may have a preservation fund where they withdrew money previously and that's preserved, and they may have a new pension fund. They can draw 30,000 or the maximum of 10% from that. But the caveat is, be warned, there's tax. And just to explain to you, when you contribute to a retirement fund, whether it be a pension, a provident fund or retirement annuity, you get a tax deduction off your taxable income. So example, you earn 1,000 Rand a month, you put 200 Rand into a retirement annuity, you will only be taxed on 800 Rand. So the receiver is paying part of that. Now what's happening, if you withdraw the money, it's like money that was deferred for future income when you retired. Now you're going to be taxed fully, and the tax rates could be anything between 26% and 45%. Because of the 45% at the high tax earner, it's a no-no for the high tax earner to draw 30,000 and pay 10 to 14,000 Rand in tax is really not on. It's for those people who are struggling, and not struggling in terms of taking the money to go and spend it, struggling to actually make ends meet, and they've got debt and they want to cover some of their debt. But you're still going to pay tax, so be aware of that. I also want to give another warning. You need to check up before you even apply for the two-pot system, because you have to get a tax directive. Do you owe the revenue any money that you may not even be aware of? Because if you owe revenue money from previous years for any reason, they will deduct it from the money that you intend to withdraw from this because of the two-pot system. So be aware, check up very carefully. And if you're going to pay off debt, now a lot of individuals have bought retirement annuities over the years and then had to stop the retirement annuities because they couldn't afford it. They have what's called paid up pensions, because you can't draw from a retirement annuity until you're 55. So they've got paid up pensions, paid up retirement annuities, which they cannot draw from. The two-pot system, the one withdrawal system on the vested portion, whatever your value was as at the 31st of August, you are able now to draw 10%. So there is an advantage, particularly for low earners who can access funds which they couldn't do before. Because the only time you could access funds previously is if you resigned or you were retrenched or whatever the case may be. Also, just to let you know, this is going to have a major impact ultimately on your retirement benefit, because if you take the amount of money that you withdraw now, take a 35-year-old who draws 30,000, that 30,000 at age 65 would be worth something like 480,000 rand in your fund. So yes, you're going to have less in retirement if you draw, and you need to understand the tax implications. So, and then I just need to share something else with you, which is important. It's not going to happen tomorrow. There's an enormous amount of administration. There's also an enormous amount of forms that need to be completed. And then you have to get a directive from the Revenue Office, and you can imagine how inundated they're going to be. But you need to make sure that if you do, please make sure that you check that you have your South African income tax number, your annual income, your South African residential address, and your South African bank details in your name. Because when you complete that form that the insurance companies require, you'll need to make sure all that information is there. And if you leave it out, you know what's going to happen? It's going to get into a pile and eventually be thrown back. The draws can take anything between, I'd say, 30 to 60 days if you give them all the information.
We're going to continue the conversation with Brian Hirsch. We're talking finance this hour and, of course, focusing on the two-pot system. It's on everybody's lips. We'll be taking your questions too within the hour.
The Mediterranean Knights are after the big prize, a win in the opener of the AFCON qualifier. But Amavubi differs and insists on travelling back home with a massive bag of 3 points. This is the Total Energies 2025 Africa Cup of Nations qualifier. Witness the beauty of African football. Libya versus Rwanda on Wednesday, 4 September at 6 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4 and SABCSport.com. Brought to you by SABC Sport. For the love of the game.
Play Powerball for an estimated 78 million rand and Powerball Plus for an estimated 22 million rand this Tuesday. That's right, 100 million rand in total estimated Powerball and Powerball Plus jackpots are waiting to be won. Buy your tickets now in store on nationallottery.co.za, the mobile app, cell phone banking app, or simply dial star 120 star 7529 hash for USSD. Panda Pusha Play. Players must be 18 years or older. Play responsibly. Ituba is the proud operator of the National Lottery.
Talking finance with Brian Hirsch, making sense of your finance.
We're talking finance with Brian Hirsch. I'll be taking your calls. 086 000 2032 is the number to dial. On the WhatsApp voice note line, 0614 104 107. We're focusing on the two-pot system. Yes, we have been preparing for this moment for a long time, but now that it's here, I think lots of people have more questions than answers. So we're going to try and give you as much time to ask those questions so that you're clear about whatever decision you want to make in as far as the opportunity of accessing your retirement funds is concerned. Brian, I want to look at the issue of SARS. Some people now believe that even the opportunity of the two-pot system is a grand conspiracy by SARS because government just wants to collect as much revenue as possible. What would your response to those views and claims be?
I don't agree with that conspiracy. It is an attempt to allow people to draw funds. Yes, I've made it very clear and explained the tax implications. You're not forced to. It's not as if you're forced to access. You can just carry on as normal. So you are, I always say, someone will say, they're going to, you bought that dress or that handbag and look at the price. you're a willing buyer. I mean, no one's forcing you into a store to buy a fancy dress or fancy shoes or a dress or fancy suit. You have the choice, and you have the choice of this two-pot system. You don't have to make use of it. And I think what's happened is I am a bit concerned about one aspect. I don't think that the trouble that was created and the outcry 10 years ago when preservation was attempted to make people preserve, because one of the reasons why people don't have enough money is people don't stick to one job all their life. You very rarely find someone who's been in a job for 40 years, and people change jobs, and when they change jobs and they leave a company, they have an option. They can take their pension money or they can preserve it. It's their choice. And many people take the money and then use those funds, and then they've now used up funds that they've saved for retirement over the years, and that's when they come to retirement they don't have enough. Preservation is now being, because of this two-pot system, I think it's been sneaked in, and I don't think people realise now, certainly younger people, 30s and 40s, that when you do leave, yes, the money that's invested for you up to the 31st of August, that is vested and that you can withdraw. But all future money, take someone who's been working for now the next 5 years and they've contributed 200,000 to their retirement fund, 2/3 will go into what they call the retirement pot, which is 133,000. That they cannot withdraw. It's good for retirement, but certainly not good as people need to understand it. The 1/3 left in the savings pot, you can either take yearly, or if you don't take it in year 1, you can take it in year 2 or year 3. You can accumulate it and take it, but again it'll be taxed. So I don't think it's conspiracy at all, because it will help many low-paid workers, maybe who've got retirement funds paid up and or money that they haven't been able to access, which they can use, but don't go and use them for a shopping spree. Don't go and do that. Use it to pay off expensive debts, because that will give you that advantage.
So, Brian, just to be clear, when we talk about preservation, right, so if, let's say you're leaving a job, you resign from a job, and then of course they give you the option. Do you want to preserve your funds or do you want to withdraw? I think you get up to what? Well,
No.
You can get up to 500 or
No, that's if you retire.
Oh,
if you
okay.
withdraw, you get the first 27,500 tax-free.
All right.
And then the balance up to 660,000 at 18%. So let me make it clear. Any money that was put into your funds, that you have in your funds as at the 31st of August, nothing changes. You can draw 10% of that amount up to a maximum of 30 taxable. And when you leave your job, but individuals now contributing from the 1st September, that 2/3 is going to be preserved. So it's forced preservation, whereas currently the law says you can preserve or you can take the money and pay the tax.
So effectively, going forward, let's say some of what we have seen where somebody, resigns from a job and they withdraw their entire pension funds, they won't be able to do that anymore.
On the new money, and
yes,
I repeat,
on the new money
from the 1st September.
Yes.
But on the old money, nothing changes the regime. So that's why there was no reason for anyone to leave retirement funds to make it in case they were preserved. They're not. So that doesn't change. But going forward, I encourage preservation, as I have on many of these programs. Preserve. If you leave your company, you can either leave it in the company's fund that you've left, or you can transfer it to your own preservation fund. That I still encourage anyone leaving with the funds that they had as at the 31st of August. But after the 31st of August, it's automatically preserved. The 2/3, the 1/3 goes into the savings pot. So it's I don't think it's a conspiracy at all. Yes, SARS will get a lot of money, but SARS is saying you don't have to use the two-pot. You don't have to. But if you do, remember, when you put money into your retirement fund, I gave you a tax deduction. Why? Because that funds are being deferred and your income will be deferred. So I gave you a generous tax deduction. If you take the money out now, I'm going to take away that provision, and you're going to pay tax.
I've got a question here, or contribution rather, from Tsidiso Bloom, and I think it's an important one for us to look at. Just looking at the time. All right, maybe let me do this. I'll read out that question from Tsidiso in a moment. Of course, we've got quite a number of questions that have started coming in. We'll take your calls on 086 000 2032. That's the number to dial for our studio line. And on the WhatsApp voice note line, you can send through your text messages and voice notes. 0614 104 107. You're listening to The Talking Point. We're leading the conversation. This is Talking Finance with Brian Hirsch. It's 10:30. Time for the latest headlines.
A very good morning to you with the news headlines. The fire burning in the mountains of the Garden Route National Park is still active, but SANParks says that an overnight counter burn was successful and all trigger points have been safeguarded. The ANC says it'll engage with the SACP General Secretary Solly Mapaila on the comments he made on a podcast where he accused the party president Cyril Ramaphosa of leading a neoliberalist faction within the ANC. And music legend Sello Chico Twala's sons are expected to appear in the Randburg Magistrates Court north of Joburg today on robbery and theft charges. Details of these and other stories at 11.
Taking a look at your markets this morning, the rand is currently trading at 17 rand 89 to the dollar, 23 rand 51 to the pound, and 19 rand 81 to the euro. Markets in Asia were lower at the closing bell. The JSE mixed in mid-morning trade. Markets in Europe are higher this hour. Gold is trading at $2,499. Platinum $928 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $76.83 a barrel.
Talking Finance with Brian Hirsch, making sense of your finance.
All right, we continue the conversation on The Talking Point. So, Brian, Tsidiso Bloemfontein says, Cathy, regarding the two-pot system, people talk about the tax, which is unfair at a marginal scale. But the most sickening one is the processing fee of about 15%. Why 15%? And who benefits from that 15%? It's like government don't really want people to get this money. So I want you to talk about the processing fee, but also this idea around government not wanting people to get their hands on this money. Because when we think about pension and saving for retirement, one absolutely gets we don't even get the sense. Government was opposed to public servants being able to withdraw from their retirement savings even in the first place. So has the process been made as difficult as possible, or almost disincentivizing people from withdrawing their funds?
Well, you're right. Initially, the government funds were excluded. Then, after because they were hoping to implement it last year. Then, on discussion, they agreed that government funds and any municipal funds would be included. No, look, you've got to go back to the basics. When you make a contribution to a retirement fund, you get a deduction. When you withdraw from a retirement fund now under the two-pot system, you're going to pay tax. I think revenue have realised, and I'm a little bit surprised, by the way. I was very surprised when it came in that they were going to be taxed at marginal rates, which indicates that low earners are maybe encouraged to use the system. High earners are not. It's not for high earners. To draw 30,000 and pay 8 or 10 or 12,000 rand of tax is ludicrous. You can't be that desperate, because someone who's at that tax rate is earning enough money. We're talking about bread line, where people are just scraping in, they're not even paying tax. So for those, I don't think it's a scheme at all. I really don't think that at all. But having said that, the big concern going forward is that the system is in now. That system has now created the two-pot. By the way, it's actually three pots, because your first pot is everything in the pot up to the 31st of August. That's one barrel, and that's freely. It'll still be invested. You'll still be able to draw it if you leave your job. The future is the two-pot, which is the 2/3 retirement fund, 1/3. Yeah, look, yes, higher earners are discouraged. Lower earners must consider exactly what it means and what they're going to do for the money. I don't think it's a big spending spree, but it's certainly going to bring money into the economy. They're talking about more than 1 million people applying. By the way, I know nothing about what I heard there. 15% administration fee to take the money.
Yep.
I need to investigate that.
Okay.
Maybe while I was away, I've got a form here, but I haven't got time to look at it now. I just wanted to talk about the system, but I think that would be onerous because the insurance companies want to cover their admin costs. But I certainly don't see anywhere. But I will comment on that next week.
All right.
Because I think that's absolutely ludicrous. Whoever's charging 15%.
Okay.
So that means of the 30,000 already, 4,500 is gone.
Yeah.
So we're down to 25,500. Then if you've got a 20% tax rate, we're down to below 19,000. Well, that to me seems to be a scam, but I don't know. And maybe one of the companies that may be listening, you can phone in and correct me or correct the caller we had about this fee.
All right. Thanks for that, Brian. Siriso, thanks for that. Brian will look at the issue of those processing or administration costs. Frank says, I recently read government is now in a better position to borrow funds from international markets using the security of the new pensions fund regulations. Much, much more gravy, Frank says.
No. Your pension funds are absolutely secure. Government can't use that money to borrow. I can tell you, there's a lot more positive activity. We've got a government of national unity. The elections globally were well received. And there's a lot more positive. So, it's like everything else. If things are a little bit better, you're able to borrow money. And remember, interest rates are going to come down. We're hoping to get a reduction this month. By the way, very encouraged this morning when I heard the oil price at 76. Tell me, have we heard anything?
Petrol is coming down.
Oh, have we heard that?
Yes,
okay.
It's coming down.
Yeah. And if it carries on like this, the rand strengthening, petrol will come down. Good for inflation, which I've been saying over the last few months. But this is not... Government's not using your pension money. They have no access to that pension money to borrow money globally. We we import more than we export because commodity prices are down. So we have to fund the difference. We don't always collect enough in tax. That's a second deficit. And that's where we have to go and borrow some funds overseas. We have borrowed at higher rates, but with rates coming down, there's a better feel. We've still got the problem of the rating agencies that haven't given improved ratings, and we've still got the whole situation where we're grey listed. So we've still got those things. It's not all... There's a better feel, much better feel, and let the box keep winning, and we'll just feel that much better.
May they keep winning, indeed. Looking forward to the final leg. Brian, this question, will every year be limited to 30,000 Rand or 10% of contributions for that year? Will a withdrawal impact my years of service? And if it does impact years of service, how will that impact me? And should I wait until January to withdraw, as I'm told that this will save me on tax? Those are questions from Anonymous.
Okay, so let me go through the first. The first question is no. You can only borrow, or not, there's no borrowing. You can only withdraw on the first section, which is the money as in your fund as at the 31st of August, one off. 10% with a maximum of 30,000. It's not every year. What is every year is your future contributions. That 1/3 goes into the savings pot. That you can borrow every year, and if you don't borrow it in year one, it'll accumulate, and you can borrow it in year two. And the tax story in the end of January is nonsense because you are taxed on a yearly basis on your earnings as at the 29th. No, we're not into leap year. 28th of February next year, everything will be added to your taxable income and you will pay tax. So whether you withdraw now or you withdraw in January, your tax situation will be exactly the same.
Does it impact the years of service?
Well, now, remember, years of service is when we talk about a defined benefit fund where, most pension funds today are defining your contribution. how much do you put in? How much does the company put in? At the end of the period, whatever that value's grown to, with all the contributions together with growth, that's what you can take out. Under a defined benefit fund, you get years of service. In other words, for the number of years you've worked, if you work for a company for 25 years, and the formula is 2% for every year you've worked, that means 25 times 2, your pension will be equal to 50% of your average salary or your final salary, depending on the rules. No, I don't think it will impact on it. But come to think of it, you know, if government people are drawing 30,000 out, because actuarially you don't actually have a value of what the employer's contribution is, because it makes up the difference between your contribution and what you have to get at retirement. Mm-hmm. So your retirement benefit is defined, not the employer's contribution. So government contribution, will it affect the two? I don't know. Another one
for you to look
another
into.
One for me. Yeah.
Oh, but you're so smart, Brian. How do you know all of this stuff, eh?
59 years now, and it's not 1 year's experience 59 times. It's 59 because I'm still learning. There you are. I've got 2 questions this morning in a half an hour program, and I really don't know the answer.
All right, so we'll wait for the answers next week. Charlene wants to know what is the best way to have available money for an executor, maybe a family member, to handle your estate. I'm told one must have 80,000 Rand up front, depending, of course, on the assets to begin with. Is it necessary to have a policy in place specifically for this, like that which Capital Legacy is offering? I just don't want my family members to be burdened with this predicament.
Okay, well, remember at death, your estate is wound up, and that's where an executive comes into being. The executor is appointed, the person you've appointed an executor. They will wind up your estate. They will distribute your assets based on your will. They will collect all the assets. They will collate and put all the assets into a document called a liquidation and a distribution account. They will also pay all the bills that you may owe. Estate is advertised for creditors to say, does this individual who's passed on owe any money? That has to be deducted. So the executive fees are statutory, are 3.5% VAT. So that is the charge that professional companies will charge and I don't agree with that, by the way. I think you can negotiate. You can appoint someone who can negotiate on your behalf. If you appoint a professional firm, in most cases they'll automatically take the 3.5. So when you say, do you need to have 80,000 set aside, the executor is going to deduct from the final valuation that's due to your beneficiaries their fee, and 3.5% can be quite onerous, because it also includes even though an insurance policy is paid out and paid out to a beneficiary, if it's not paid out to a spouse, if it's paid out to children, it will be included in your estate. So I know Capital Legacy are offering a policy to cover those executive fees. I don't know what their premiums are, how high they are. It's worth looking at, also worth looking at in the market. And then the most important thing is for you to understand when you die, is there liquidity? Because you may have a home, you may have a whole lot of assets that are tied up in businesses, and very hard to liquidate those assets. So you need to have some liquidity, and the best way of creating liquidity in an estate is through a life insurance policy.
One other question says, good morning. Is it possible to get tax deductions for shares bought for retirement purposes in a self-managed portfolio, as in use the pension fund money withdrawn?
Okay, well, if you're in a pension fund, all the funds in the pension fund grow tax-free until retirement. You don't pay dividends tax, you don't pay capital gains tax, you don't pay tax on interest. It's all accumulated in your retirement fund. If you've got your own personal fund, then obviously dividends paid will have a withholding tax in South Africa of 20%, which is deducted at source. If you sell a share, it then you become liable for capital gains tax. The first 40,000 Rand in any 1 year, whilst you're alive, I think it's 300 or 400,000 in event of death, is deducted from that capital gain, and you have to pay. Yes, you do have to pay it if it's outside a retirement fund, as well if it's outside tax-free savings. If you've got tax-free savings, all that roll-up in tax-free savings is subject to, there's no tax payable. But in your own portfolio, any gain that you make on property, residential property, the first 2 million rand of any gain is free of capital gains tax, the balance, and then capital gains tax, just to give you the information, is what gets added to your taxable income is 40% of the gain in your own hands, 80% in a company or a trust gets added to your taxable income. So there are benefits. Other parts of the world, whatever the gain is, gets added to your taxable income. We've still got a very friendly disposition for capital gains tax. But in your own share portfolio, dividend tax you'll pay. If you earn interest, if you get, for example, if you're holding property funds, that is an income, rental income distribution, fully taxable, and then any capital gains is taxed. I hope I've answered that question.
Brian, you've touched a lot on what it is that you think people should be using their withdrawals from the 2.4, and you mentioned the issue of servicing debt quite a number of times. Why servicing debt? Well, because I imagine some people are thinking, well, maybe if I renovate my house, or if I put a deposit towards a car, or some of those big ticket items.
Yeah, but that 30,000 after expenses, after tax, is not going to go that far. You want to buy a car, it's not going to put down 30,000 or maybe 25,000 after tax. It's not enormous. I keep saying, you've got to understand, you've got healthy debt and you've got unhealthy debt. Having a bond on your property is not unhealthy. You've got to live somewhere. You'd have to pay rent. I don't call that unhealthy debt. It's high at the moment, prime being at 11.75%. We're going to get interest rate deductions, which is going to be other than petrol price coming down and maybe other goods coming down. We always say nothing ever comes down, it only goes up. Again, I think you'll find interest rates coming down this month, and then gradually over the next 18 months further interest rates. I reckon our interest rates could be down 2.5%. So if you're paying 11.5% on your bond, I reckon you'd have your bond rate down at 9% by the end of next year. And that's if we have no black swan events, which means any shocks to our economy. But so that'll help with your savings. However, just be aware that the two-pot system, I repeat, is not for high earners and not for expenditure. Why take it out? I mean, really, it's to pay off that expensive debt, which is a lot of that debt, which certainly unsecured debt and money and debt that's at the highest level. But certainly your bond and even maybe a car today, your rate is nothing compared to unsecured debt, because remember, when you borrow for money to buy a car, they've got the security of the car. It won't maybe not cover all the full amount of your borrowings, but it's certainly they've got a lot more secured. So when you go for unsecured debt, that maybe you want to get rid of it.
All right, Ninja, you're in KZN. Good morning, Ninja.
Good morning, Kath. How are you?
I'm good. Go for it.
Good morning to Brian as well.
Morning, Ninja.
Good morning, sir. I'm sure you heard this term quantitative easing.
Yep.
Yeah, and to me, I've done a think on this. Now, this is a short-term relief, what the government has proposed. For long-term implications and dire consequences. I'll explain this to you briefly. So you take out your money, you pay it, and eventually you run out of funds. Then the government will have to pay in grants to sustain a lot of people. So it's going to impact on the government in a different way in the long run. Yes, Brian?
And your question to me?
Yeah, it's a long-term problem for the government. You see, how are they going to sustain this? Because they'll have to borrow more money to pay grants. At the moment, the government is laden with debt, and I don't know how they're going to sort this out, because it's not a level playing field. Look at the unemployment rate, and the unemployment rate isn't going to come down in the short term unless they come up with a sound economic.
All right.
Okay.
It looks like we've lost Benji.
Look, I think I've got the gist. You're
Yeah.
absolutely right. But let me make this comment. The focus of the economic improvements going forward is to create jobs. And even yesterday, there was comments made by the Chinese authorities saying they're quite willing to invest money in South Africa. And if they invest in South Africa, hopefully they will employ South Africans and not Chinese, because that's what they tend to do all over the world. They open operations and then they move people from China into these positions. Hopefully there's a discussion. We're part of the BRICS, the original BRICS being Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Now that's 5, now they're 11, but hopefully that will come to fruition, and government are working on that all the time. They want to create jobs. That's what's going to help our economy, getting people working, because as you know, in most cases, one salary supports anything between 8 and 10 family members. So we need to get that down. We need to create employment. Quantitative easing means as well benefit to government, because we are paying the higher rates at the moment because interest rates are high, and as there's quantitative easing globally, our cost of paying off debt will come down. Our rand has improved as well. So when you calculated how much we owed when the rand was 19 and now it's 17.89, which is morning, that also brings down the amount that we owe, because when you convert to the rand value, you with the rand having strengthened, that all benefits the economy. Just remember, interest rates coming down is not going to have an immediate effect. Yes, some people will feel it in their pocket, but it's not going to have a major impact in the early stages of how our economy is going to improve. But things are a lot better than they were 6 weeks ago. We've seen petrol price come down, I think 3 times now in succession. Individuals are going to have more interest rate cuts. I just think there's a much better feel. There's a lot to be done. Cathy was dealing in the hour before I came when I was driving here with corruption. There's a lot still to be done, but I think there's certainly a better feel, and if we're all feeling just a little bit better, even if it's only 1%, it's better than we were feeling 2 or 3 months ago.
All right, we're going to continue the conversation with Brian. I've lined up so many of your WhatsApp voice notes. We'll get to those on the other side of this break.
Ashupol is over 110 years old and was born out of the desire to serve South Africans who work hard to build this country from the ground up. With over 5 million lives covered and named Best Life Insurer by Forbes, Ashupol is here for you today and will be there for your family tomorrow. SMS serve to 44366 and we'll call you back. Ashupol is an insurer licensed to conduct life insurance business, an authorized financial services provider. FSP 53. T's and C's to apply.
The Mediterranean Knights are after the big prize, a win in the opener of the AFCON qualifier. But Amavubi differs and insists on traveling back home with a massive bag of 3 points. This is the Total Energies 2025 Africa Cup of Nations qualifier. Witness the beauty of African football. Libya versus Rwanda on Wednesday, 4 September at 6 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4 and SABCSport.com. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Are you shopping around for the best car insurance deal on the market? 46-year-old Zanele got a great deal on her car insurance when she called Outsurance. She now pays only $1,313 to insure her white 2023 Audi Q2 1.4 TFSI S-Line S-Tronic. Get an Outsurance quote and see if you could save. SMS out to 30754 now. That's out to 30754. Outsurance is a licensed insurer in FSP. T's and C's online.
Talking Finance with Brian Hirsch, making sense of your finance.
So, Brian, we're going to go into the WhatsApp voice notes. I want to take...
Before we do,
yes.
I just read while then took that break the Liberty Life forms, and I wanted to see what you required. There is no mention at all with Liberty Life about any of processing fee. I will find out. I'll also find out what the industry has to say about this. And can I make one other comment? Do not allow anyone to phone you and tell you they can handle this two-pot system. The fraudsters will have great delight in helping you and taking your funds. Be very, very careful about it. There's actually a warning on the Liberty documentation. It says here, be fraud aware. Criminals may take this as an opportunity to gain access to your personal details or funds. Be warned.
Okay. We consider ourselves warned, Brian.
Morning, Katie. Katie, also, man, ask Brian there, man. If I didn't take my money for pension fund, maybe let's say for instance for 3 years, if I wanted to take it after 3 years, so can I take it? I will be able to take it. Well, it was going to be, let's say for example, 90,000 or 100,000. If I didn't take it like this year, it's 30,000. Maybe after 2 years I didn't take it, which means it's gonna be 90,000. So when I wanted to take it, I was going to allow me to take me 90,000, or I'm still gonna take 30,000. Thank you, Katie. Have a nice show. Bye bye.
If your fund is 90,000, you'll only be able to take 10%, which is 9,000. But if you leave the 90,000 that's now set up for you at the 31st of August, you can only take when you resign from the company. The two-pot system allows people to take money and remain in employment. Previously, to get money out of your fund, you had to resign. In your particular case, that 90,000 you can take any time, plus all the growth. So let's assume 90,000 goes for 5 more years, and it goes to 200,000. That 200,000 you can take. It's only future contributions from the 1st of September that are ring-fenced in this two-pot system.
So I think that's what he's asking, Brian, that if his future contribution that's ring-fenced, let's say next year is 30,000, if he doesn't take that money out, will he be able to withdraw the full 90,000 in 3 years' time?
No. Whatever in the 31st of August he can withdraw, going forward, if he puts in 30,000 Rand, 2/3 goes to the retirement pot, and unless you retire, you can't take it, and the 1/3 goes into the savings. You can take the 1/3 savings.
So in 3 years' time, he would only be able to withdraw what is in the savings account.
Yes,
of the retirement
plus
component.
the money he's got in today.
Yes, okay.
That will continue to grow.
Okay.
And he'll be able to take that together with the 1/3 if he hasn't taken it.
All right, okay. Thank you. I hope that helps.
Morning, Kathy. Since you are now going to have two pots, does this mean from the 1st of September, my retirement pot is 000? The amount in it is 000, and the money that I've accumulated on my pension over the past 10 years is now going to be transferred to my vested pot, or is a portion of the money, of the pension money that I have now, going to remain in my retirement pot? Or does this mean I have to start from scratch in my retirement pot? Thank you very much.
Correct. From the 1st of September, everyone starts off with nil. The money that was there as at the 31st of August is ring-fenced for your use if you resign, whatever happens when you reach retirement. Going forward, your first pot, the two pots will be filled by the contribution made on end of September. Let's assume your contribution is 15,000. 10 goes to retirement pot, 5 goes to savings. Over the year, we worked out that's going to be 180,000. 120,000 will be in your retirement pot. 60,000 will be in your savings pot that you can draw, and you can also draw the money that was in the fund as at the 31st of August. So no one has to do anything. You don't be talked into withdrawing money. It's there. You're protected. Just carry on as is.
Anonymous, you're in the Eastern Cape. Good morning.
Morning, kids. How are you?
Well, thank you.
I'm okay. Thanks, man. I just want to be short, man. Our pension money is with Old Mutual. So yesterday we located the app, Old Mutual app, to check if now we can start to withdraw. Now we receive emails to say we can only have access on the 23rd of September. Okay. So can you please maybe investigate for us, or maybe ask someone from Old Mutual just to explain this thing on the public? because we didn't know.
So basically, you want to know why they're not giving you the option of withdrawing today, and why you can only start withdrawing on the 23rd
of September, and they never told us all this time.
Okay. And yes. Anonymous, you want to withdraw a portion of your funds?
Yes, please.
If you don't mind my asking, what are you going to do with the money?
I want to try to advance my the school fees for my kids.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
All right, Brian?
Okay, Anonymous, firstly, whatever you draw, is taxable. I've dealt with that at length this morning. Why the 23rd? Because two things have to happen. You have to get a tax directive. The receiver of revenue has to determine how much tax they're going to deduct based on your earnings. Beware again, if you owe the receiver of revenue any money, they will deduct it before paying over to you. You could end up with nothing. The reason the 23rd is so you need to get a tax directive, and then there's administration, and it does take time. If anyone's retiring today, you're retiring from the government fund, it can take months. But if you're retiring from a pension fund, it can take anything between 4 to 8 weeks. So I think the 23rd, giving you that date as the 23rd, I think that date is probably the earliest they'll pay you out. But then also be aware, you need to make sure you give them all the information. You complete the forms. Do not leave out anything about your details so that you don't have it thrown back at you in a week or two and then you start the whole process again. But I think the 23rd, which is 3 weeks' time, I think that's very reasonable to get a tax directive and to get through the administration. And I said to many people months ago, start getting all your ducks in a row because you're going to end up in a queue. And those that come in later will just go to the back of the queue. If there's a broker involved, maybe the broker can push it. Who knows? I'm not quite sure what their pecking order is going to be.
Okay. All right. Anonymous, I hope that answers your question.
Yes, ma'am. It answers my question.
All right. Wonderful. All the best, Anonymous.
Thank you.
And you've done the maths to make sure it's not going to put you in a different tax bracket, right? Oh, all right. It looks like we've lost Anonymous there. Yeah, please don't forget to do the calculation because it's added to your income. If it leaves you in a different tax bracket, then it's just going to be a problem. So make sure that you have done all of the maths. Okay, Brian, your number?
011-880-4888, 011-880-4888. I can't help anyone access funds. You've got to deal that directly with the company. Next week, 2 questions need to be answered. One, this processing fee, and the second is, how will it affect your years of service in any way?
All right. More from Brian next week. It's time for the latest news update.
The top stories this hour: the Garden Route National Park fire still active, and Chico Twala's sons to appear in court. A very good morning to you. The fire burning in the mountains of the Garden Route National Park is still active, but SANParks says an overnight counter-burn was successful and all trigger points have been safeguarded. SANParks spokesperson JP Lowe says the risk of damage to infrastructure and commercial plantations has been averted. He says it crossed the Groot Rivier and will burn up north where it is supposed to burn. Rain is also predicted for tomorrow, and firefighting teams hope that it will assist in dousing the fire. The fire was caused by a lightning strike, and efforts to control it include counter-burns and aerial water bombing. The ANC says it will engage with the SACP General Secretary Solly Mapaila on the comments he made on a podcast where he accused party President Cyril Ramaphosa of leading a neoliberalist faction within the ANC. Mapaila, who has been highly critical of the Government of National Unity, also told the podcast that the GNU was a betrayal of the people and was giving him sleepless nights. ANC SG Fikile Mbalula briefed the media at the ANC headquarters in Joburg.
So we will debate neoliberalism with Comrade Solly, and there is nothing wrong with that. But if Comrade Solly then goes and label us and say we're neoliberals and our president is leading a big faction, we will resist that. There is no faction in the ANC. the dominant idea that wins the day, it is out of a rigorous process of engagement. GNU was not imposed in the NEC, it was debated.
Music legend Sello Chico Twala's sons are expected to appear in the Randburg Magistrates Court north of Joburg today. Sello and Longwe Twala were arrested after their father opened a case of robbery and theft against them at the Douglasdale police station. He accuses them of stealing his studio equipment at his home in Fourways.
Case of the helper actually witnessed Longwe taking out some boxes, running away. So, yeah, I mean, it's his life. He's been doing that for some time. It's not something new to actually maintain his drug lifestyle. Besides, Sello does not take drugs. I don't know what got into him. He lied to me, Sello. I only heard that they colluded when Longwe was arrested. I had to ask the police to arrest both of them.
The African Transformation Movement, ATM, has called on government to waiver taxes on the pension fund withdrawals. The two-pot retirement system came into effect on the 1st of this month. The party also wants the government to reconsider the 30,000 rand cap on withdrawals, as they say this limit could exacerbate financial struggles for debt-burdened workers. ATM spokesperson Zaman Jona.
If you are closer to your threshold in terms of the tax bracket, when you add this on top of this, in just 12 months' time, it would have pushed you out of the current tax bracket and it introduces you to the next one, and therefore even your taxes are going to increase. So for us as the African Transformation Movement, we do not see how that is going to assist. So this is one of the ways we can alleviate workers from this challenge, the burden that comes with the tax and the fees of transferring this money would actually leave them at no better state than they were before.
And a BBC investigation has found that the number of illegal Israeli settler outposts in the occupied West Bank has risen rapidly, with 29 set up last year, more than any previous year. Documents seen by the BBC also show how sanctioned settlers have been supported by an organization with close ties and funding from the Israeli state. The BBC's Amir Nadu reports.
The World Zionist Organization's Settlement Division distributes land to Israelis in the occupied West Bank to use for farming, but forbids the building of any structures. Documents obtained by an Israeli NGO and analysed by the BBC show how the WZO repeatedly allocated land to settlers who then constructed illegal outposts on it. 2 of these settlers were sanctioned by the UK earlier this year for violence or intimidation of Palestinians living near them. The WZO did not respond to our questions.
The top story this hour, the fire burning in the mountains of the Garden Route National Park is still active, but SANParks says an overnight counter-burn was successful and all trigger points have been safeguarded. For SAFM News, Gemudupi Makhalemeli.
Only the final whistle can reveal who are the real football kings of East Africa. Neighbors won't get along during the East African Derby. This is the Total Energies 2025 Africa Cup of Nations qualifier. Witness the beauty of African football. Tanzania takes on Ethiopia on Wednesday, 4 September at 6 p.m. Live at your fingertips on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Play Powerball for an estimated 78 million rand and Powerball Plus for an estimated 22 million rand this Tuesday. That's right, 100 million rand in total estimated Powerball and Powerball Plus jackpots are waiting to be won. Buy your tickets now in store on nationallottery.co.za, the mobile app, cell phone banking, or simply dial *120 *7529# for USSD. Panda Pusha Play players must be 18 years or older. Play responsibly. Ituba is the proud operator of the National Lottery.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
It's 8 after 11 o'clock. Welcome to the third and final hour of the Talking Point. Look, I think when it comes to the two-pot system, we're never going to exhaust the conversation. I think as people have the opportunity to be able to withdraw and access those monies, whatever issues you're encountering, whatever questions you may have, please get in touch with us, get in touch with Brian, and make sure that when you make the decision to withdraw, you've actually done the maths. Be clear about how much you're going to be taxed on that money. Be clear about how much is going to come into your pocket, so that you don't find yourself disappointed at the end of the day, perhaps ending up with a lot less than what you may have bargained for. So it's one of those that really is going to be an ongoing conversation, and we will deal with it as and when we need to throughout the next couple of months. Our final conversation for today is going to be focusing on migration and development on the African continent. It follows a forum held by the National Planning Commission and the International Organization for Migration under the theme Migration as a Development Catalyst. And of course, joining us for the conversation is the Deputy Chairperson of the National Planning Commission, Professor Diniko Maluleke. Prof, good morning to you. Thanks for your time this morning.
Good morning, Cathy. Long time.
Yes, it has been a while. Great to hear from you and be in conversation with you this morning, Prof. I wanted to ask you, I've looked at the statement that came out of conference and also some of the remarks that were made during this forum. It seems to me that it was intentionally provocative to have the theme of migration as a development catalyst. Why is it that it is provocative? Why did you feel that you were pushing against the grain?
Well, yes and no. I don't know that it is necessarily provocative or only provocative. I think that migration has been, for the longest time in human history, a catalyst for development. If we look at it in the long term, in the long haul, and not limit it to the now and the most contemporary experience of it. So there was nothing provocative intended. I think it was meant seriously. It does sound provocative because the issue of migration has become, in some ways, controversial and has been handled in divisive ways in many countries. It certainly has become an issue on which election campaigns turn, both in Europe, in the US, and in other parts of the world. And in that sense, a statement that ought to be quite mundane and ordinary comes across as provocative.
Do you feel that there is a prevailing narrative around migration and the fact that it's seen more as an inhibitor of development rather than as a catalyst for development?
Yeah, certainly the dominant narrative in some parts of the world, certainly in our part of the world, seems to be edging towards that, understanding of migration as an inhibitor of development. Because when you mention the word migration, people immediately think of illegal immigrants, they immediately think of undocumented immigrants, they immediately think of the struggle or the jostling for opportunities between immigrants and citizens of certain countries. So to that extent, yes, it has a bad name. Certainly in some parts of the world more than others, but it ought not to be an automatic case that migration is always and necessarily bad, because migration is the migration of talent. It is the renewal of countries. It is the exchange of ideas and skills, and it ought to be seen in a much broader context. And that is not to deny the problems that come with certain kinds of migration and the way different states manage migration.
So when we look at the opportunity then that migration presents, how do you think that individual countries should be approaching this conversation? Because, again, one very much gets the sense that there are right ways and wrong ways of dealing with the question of migration.
Yeah, certainly. I think one of the important points made at our conference was the significance of data, that migration policies and migration practices ought to be informed by data, hard data and evidence, and that we need to move away from mythical statements and imaginary numbers and imagined patterns of migration, and rely as much as possible on hard data. But to generate hard data, you need functioning systems within nation states. Departments of Home Affairs should be more on top of the game than has been the case in many states. And the sharing of data between states ought to be at a higher level than it currently is. And my sense, our sense at the conference was that the data ought to be digitized more, so that it is possible to manage, the numbers and understand what exactly is going on better than now. So we live in a situation where there is a lot of imagination. I'm not sure which number is ringing, or is it ringing in my ears only?
No, yeah, we heard it on air too. The team is trying to deal with it. Apologies.
Okay, so data is a very important aspect of it, and also just sharing of data between states, but also between state and private companies, because there are many private companies involved in migration, either as recruiting agencies or sometimes merely as transportation agencies. And then, of course, the laws around migration, the cost of migration, both for those who migrate from one country and the countries that receive them. That kind of information tends to be very much mythical, and people make it up instead of making sure that we know the numbers well. And we also looked at the other side of the economic impact of migration, both on receiving and sending countries, as an area of further exploration if we are to understand migration as a catalyst for development.
Does it not assume, Prof, that countries are moving from the same page on this conversation? Because in order to have the kind of collaboration and working together, data sharing that you envision, it would mean that all countries need to support migration and support the idea that migration is good for development. And yet we know that there are countries who are talking about reinforcing their borders, building walls. And what that speaks to is not necessarily around these countries only protecting their sovereignty, but there's an undertone to it that also suggests that there's some people that are not welcome here.
Oh, yes. I mean, I don't want to repeat some of the statements that have been said by some world leaders like Donald Trump around the issue of of migration and the building of walls and countries that are described in terms that should not be repeated anywhere. So there is that kind of narrative going on, but I think that is the extreme, really. I think most countries appreciate that migration cannot be stopped, certainly not through the use of walls or profiling, because there's also widespread profiling of people depending on race, gender, and nationality, sometimes religion, around issues of migration. Those will not take us anywhere, and I think that the sooner countries understand that and share information about that, the better. Of course, in order to have a rational and controlled and understood flow of migration in and out, we need the necessary laws, we need the necessary data, we need the necessary collaboration, but we also need to appreciate the positive in migration instead of only emphasizing the negative. I mean, think about the talent that may accrue to a country that does not have that talent at that time through migration, which is properly managed and properly controlled. Think of the economic power of people in the diaspora and how much they contribute back to their own country, but also contribute to the country where they live as migrants. So all of these things, rather than treat migration as a stepchild, as a bad word, as a swear word, we ought to be looking for ways to explore its potential. Of course, I'm not speaking about lawlessness. I'm not speaking about a situation where we just, a laissez-faire kind of situation, but one where data, evidence, rationality, science, and digitalization basically drive our policies and protocols for migration.
Prof, some of the stats that were shared during the conference was around the African diaspora and how $65 billion is sent to the continent through the diaspora. And this figure, of course, surpasses what Africa receives in international aid. So those numbers, of course, are absolutely staggering because we just think about it as money that perhaps is sent from one member of a family to their relatives back home. Now, the cumulative effect becomes this 65 billion rand. What is the opportunity that is presented by that? How do you see the diaspora being part of this conversation?
One of the most exciting segments of the conference was precisely that. Just for us to come to terms with the amount of economic and capital injection that the continent receives from Africans in the diaspora, and how often this injection is left out of the mainstream economy and is not properly accounted for, and it is not even facilitated. In fact, in many countries, it is made hard for one to send money from one country to another, with all manner of admin fees and taxes and haggles, and how the removal of all those could even add an extra 10 billion from the amount that you have just mentioned. So we need to find a way to streamline, but also to bring the diaspora remittances into the main economy and not just between families. And that would mean making sure that, I mean, listening to the plans that countries like Ethiopia have, and some of the ways in which they have used the remittance money for the national project and not just for the families. And the plans that countries like Nigeria have, if those plans were to be realized around diaspora remittances, then we could begin to see the impact of these injections of remittances into the GDP and not just the families. For now, it is left between families, and often it tends to be made very, very difficult for even family members to send money to one another, and they get taxed and punished heavily for doing it.
What is the case? What is the case that you think countries would be able to make to individuals? Because ultimately, these are individuals that have worked very hard to, for lack of a better phrase, find themselves out of the system, create opportunities for themselves. And, you know, it's not wrong for them to want their families to be the beneficiaries of that progress. So how would you justify that? To say, well, actually, instead of sending your remittances to your family, we think that there's a broader cause here. Help us build South Africa. Help us build Malawi. Help us build Nigeria.
Well, of course, already by sending money to their families, they are contributing to the economy of the country, because they are giving their families buying power. They are giving their families earning power that they might not have, and impacting on mitigating, maybe that's a better word, mitigating the effects of poverty, unemployment, and inequality that we talk about. They are already mitigating those by just between the families. But if we were to encourage them to think about not just their families, but the national issues and the future of children, for example, and how they might contribute to the education system, to the building of schools and universities, I think many of them would be keen to participate. I mean, Ethiopia has proved that Ethiopians overseas are interested in whether the country has dams and water and so on, and they are willing to contribute to that. I think they just need to be encouraged. They just need to be given a plan, and they just need to be shown that their dollar can go a little further if they invested it wider than they do.
Prof, as we get ready to wrap up this conversation, one of the points that I think will be important for me to raise is around the case studies that you looked at the conference, and the question of the economies and how closely intertwined economies on the continent are. Because, again, often when we look at the question of migration, especially for a country like South Africa, we see ourselves almost as somewhat of a pariah state, right? That we're operating almost independently, and yet we know that our economic fortunes are tied to not only the Southern African region, but also to the broader continent. That's the only way we're going to be able to grow our economies. How do we begin to have that conversation in a way that perhaps fosters greater understanding around migration, and also the preparedness that individual countries need to have?
Yeah, the nation state is both a blessing and a curse. And it is not about South Africa. It is about all countries. I mean, the advent of the nation state gave every nation state the impression that it could exist on its own, and that it does not need, all it needs to do is to concentrate on sealing its borders and so on. But actually, the conversation you are asking me about, Cathy, we have already been having on the continent when we began to speak about trade. Many years ago when Kwame Nkrumah spoke about the United States of Africa. But more recently around trade and the transportation or travel of goods between African borders. But what we need to do is to fine-tune the idea of the traveling of people between African borders so that people don't need to jump through fences and to look for ways to beat the system. And in that way, we would be able to know who's where and what contribution can they make, what potential do they have. So we are already having those conversations. There is no way that the South African economy will, in the long term, be able to survive if all our borders are sealed. We depend on Zambia just as much as Zambia depends on us. We depend on Malawi just as much as Malawi depends on us. There are thousands, if not millions, of South Africans all over the continent, and South African companies actually all over the continent. So we are much more interdependent than we let on. And if we were to be rational and to open up protocols and policies and to make sure that we acknowledge these interdependencies and leverage them rather than demonize them, I think that we could go further.
All right. Prof, thank you for your contributions to this conversation. Professor Cathy Mohlahlana is the Deputy Chairperson of the National Planning Commission. It's 11:30, time for the latest news headlines.
Very good morning. With the news headlines, the Gauteng government says it is relieved that MPL Muiponi Mhlongo, who was allegedly hijacked and abducted in Ekurhuleni yesterday, has been found safe. The fire burning in the mountains of the Garden Route National Park is still active, but SANParks says an overnight counter-burn was successful and all trigger points have been safeguarded. And a new poll conducted in 16 countries has revealed that almost 60% of young people in Africa are considering emigrating. A full news update coming up at noon.
Catch the Tastemaster Junior this Tuesday evening at 7 on SABC2. It's Elimination Week and the bottom 6 must bake their ultimate cookie and milkshake pairing. It's a match made in heaven, but will they perfect their flavor combinations under pressure? Take part in the weekly viewers competition and stand a chance of winning a classic stand mixer to the value of 10,000 Rand. That's the Tastemaster Junior this Tuesday evening at 7. Repeat Wednesdays at 1 and Sundays at 4 p.m. Only on SABC2.
Comoros and the Gambia have a huge clash for 90 minutes in the AFCON qualifier. Both nations are optimistic for the significant 3 points. Yet, the question remains, who wants it the most? This is the Total Energies 2025 Africa Cup of Nations qualifier. Witness the beauty of African football. Comoros up against the Gambia on Wednesday, 4 September at 5 p.m. Live at your fingertips on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
Well, this conversation has been brought to you by ABSA Business Banking. Your story matters. ABSA. Well, ABSA has spent the past year introducing new programs to support women who want to become entrepreneurs. Our next guest is going to be sharing some of the reasons for the underrepresentation of women in business and what ABSA believes can be done to empower these women entrepreneurs. Joining us is Kanya Matsikwe, Head of Client at ABSA. Kanya, good morning to you. Thank you for your time this morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Look, we know that the entrepreneurship landscape has absolutely changed, especially on a formal basis. We are seeing the entry of more and more women. Unfortunately, however, it is still lower than that of men. And sometimes it comes down to the challenges that women face. Do you get the sense that it's just generally tougher for women to be in business than men, and why?
Thank you for that question. And it's interesting coming out of Women's Month that we're just celebrating last month. You know, while in South Africa, we're known as having an entrepreneurial spirit, and there's no doubt that there's a lot of opportunity that exists. The reality is that most business owners, regardless of whether they're men or women, do face many challenges. But there are some challenges that are unique to women, such as juggling the responsibilities of a home. We know from Status data that 42% of households in South Africa are run and led by women. But other challenges include, poor access to networks, having a voice in the room to be able to get access to funding and representation on investment teams in particular are some of the challenges that women in business face that their male counterparts don't to the same degree.
When we look at women and the challenges they face, would you say that these are vastly different to those that young people in business face?
Yeah, we know that there are many similarities and many overlaps between challenges that women and young people in business face. But in particular for young people in business, it's, having access to that startup capital. And, it's being able to have access to finance to start the business, run the business, as well as grow the business. Over and above that, some of the key challenges that young people in business face is, the experience of having run a business and having the right networks in order to access the right markets. So it's one thing, being able to register a business. It's another to put a product in front of paying customers. And that's really what some of the solutions within ABSA we look at are, such as ABSA SME Fridays. It's about creating access to networks and access to markets for young people and women in business.
Let's talk about some of these specific interventions that you as ABSA have been working on. You've brought on a couple of partners, including the African Development Bank and the Frankfurt School of Finance and Management. Tell us about these partnerships and what you are hoping they will do for female-run businesses and youth SMEs.
Yeah, sure. So last year we launched two solutions, ABSA She Thrive and ABSA Emerging Entrepreneur, which are both targeting women and youth in business respectively. Embedded in both of these solutions were both banking and beyond banking solutions. So when we look at the banking side, it's about having access to payments, access to finance, and access to a transactional account with transparent pricing. At the end of the day, as a business owner, you want to have that level of certainty of what you're paying for and what you're getting. Over and above that, we recognize the importance of skills development and real access to networks for our clients. And we do that through partnerships such as the one that you've noted now. Our partnership with the African Development Bank and the Frankfurt School of Finance and Management is really about putting power in the hands of our business owners. And we've developed these comprehensive programs looking at three things. The first is a funding readiness webinar series, which runs on the last Thursday of every month, with the first one having been launched last month in August. And the importance of the series is to say, prior to you accessing funding, it's important to make sure that your business is ready for that. And what does it mean for a business owner to get funding ready? And that funding readiness webinar series seeks to address that. The second is to say, from an access to networks point of view, how do we put together a program that goes beyond strategy, beyond the boardroom, beyond the classroom, and put real practical skills in the hands of our clients. And then the last piece is really around ongoing coaching and mentorship because it's one thing to learn skills in a closed classroom. It's another to, apply those as you're running your business. And that's what this partnership seeks to achieve, because it's about building a holistic solution at the end of the day.
These are really exciting webinars because often, again, when it comes to entrepreneurs, is that there is so much paperwork that is involved in the process of applying for funding, whether you're applying to a state-owned development FDIs or whether it's to banks like ABSA. Where do you find that often people go wrong in the process? Because again, some businesses fail not because the ideas are bad ideas, but that there just isn't that support to help them, get to the next phase?
Yeah, that's a great question. For many businesses, accessing funding is an important lever, both in being able to start or grow your business. And now, if you put yourself in the shoes of a business owner that's wearing multiple hats, so your CEO, your head of HR, your head of finance, you're also, actually running the factory floor, for instance, there are a lot of things to be considering at any given point in time. Part of what makes ABSA stand out in this instance is the fact that the majority of our clients within the SME space are pre-scored, right? So if you have a transactional business bank account with us, filling in those application forms, which is quite admin intensive, is then no longer a requirement. And so it's also about being able to answer what are those pre-funding questions. So as a business owner, having clarity on how much funding you need, what you need the funding for. Can the business afford to repay any kind of funding? And also, will the funding give you access to new markets and therefore growth? So those are important questions to ask yourself prior to even starting the application process. And it's important to also consider, part of getting funding ready is separating the personal and business finances. And this is often more difficult, particularly for businesses that are starting out. But building that track record as early as possible is what enables that access.
Yeah, you make such a good point about the separation between the personal and the business finances. As you've said, you have these individuals that are literally a one-stop shop, right? So, of course, even when it comes to the finances, there is that conflation there. Let's talk about your She's Next program that you're running in collaboration with Visa.
Yes, so She's Next is an incredible program that we've partnered with Visa on. It is a global initiative designed to support and empower women in business, specifically by providing them with resources, tools, and funding opportunities. As ABSA, we are the first partner in sub-Saharan Africa to launch this program with Visa, and it's seeking to address pure developmental challenges that women in business face. Because at the end of the day, when we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's everything from running a business, starting a business, and scaling that business. And this program with Visa, She's Next, is the objective is to address each of those key requirements through a targeted development program.
I imagine that the question on the mind of those that are listening is, how can they participate? How can they get involved and sign up for these programs?
Yes, of course. So in particular, all the information related to ABSA She Thrives and Emerging Entrepreneur is available on our website, and we've got a dedicated line for entrepreneurs that they can ask any questions on. But also on our socials, we've got these programs that are running, such as the Funding Readiness webinar series that I've made mention of, which is open to all, by the way, whether you're a business starting out, whether you've just got an idea, or you've been in business for a long time. The idea and the objective is for it to be democratic in nature. We don't want to make it seem that it's only to very specific businesses, and that's quite important because just because a business has been operating for a number of years doesn't mean that they don't need a similar level of support from a funding point of view. So all this information is available on our social media platforms as well as our website.
Kanya Matikwe, let me thank you so much for your time and for this conversation. She is the head of client at ABSA. And of course, this conversation has been brought to you by ABSA Business Banking. Your story matters, ABSA. Well, that brings us to the end of the talking point for today. We will be back with you again tomorrow between 9 and midday. Have yourselves a lovely afternoon. And of course, stay tuned to SAFM for all your latest news and current affairs updates. And of course, lots of talk that keeps you in good company. Do enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Only the final whistle can reveal who are the real football kings of East Africa. Neighbors won't get along during the East African Derby. This is the Total Energies 2025 Africa Cup of Nations qualifier. Witness the beauty of African football. Tanzania takes on Ethiopia on Wednesday, 4 September at 6 p.m. Live at your fingertips on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Amatax ladies target all 3 essential points to climb up the ladder, but the ladies from eThekwini plan to demonstrate a sense of urgency to move from the bottom half. This is the Hollywood Bet Super League. Catch Mzansi Queens of the beautiful game. University of Pretoria Ladies FC versus Durban Ladies FC on Saturday, 7 September at 2:30 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4, SABC 1 and SABC radio stations. Also available at your fingertips on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
SAFM, leading the conversations that move us.
It is alleged that the Libyans have been in the base since April.
So how long have police intelligence been aware of this facility?
To be frank with you, at this moment, it's something that also during the visit by the minister it was indicated that cannot share much on the things besides the information that was received by the intelligence structure. There were other information from members of the community.
Wow. A security camp used for military training. Why are foreign nationals being trained in security or guerrilla warfare or whatever it is in South Africa? If South Africans were in another country being trained for those purposes, my word, they would be regarded as terrorists, it would be treason, they'd probably be locked up by those countries and everything.
Update at noon with Sakina Kamwendo, midday to 1 p.m.
The book reading. Please note that the views expressed in this book are not that of the station. Listeners' discretion is advised. SAFM presents another episode of A Life of Purpose, written by Luvuyo Wachela and Lumkile Wiseman Kuhlu. The reader is Lerato Velase.
The government banked on these witnesses to link all the accused to the political organizations, even though their individual membership could not be proved. Some of Wiseman's former classmates gave evidence against him and the other accused. Many of his friends, who like him were expelled from Lovedale, became the main accused. Some of these included his homeboys Kayagude Maham and Batini Gwambi, and David Kambula of Sterkspruit, who was a year younger than Wiseman and was also asthmatic. There was also Fumbata Mlenge, the youngest in the group, and the younger brother of Griffiths Mlenge of King Williamstown, who later became a civil rights lawyer. Other accused included Ezra Desani from Port Elizabeth, and Quadram Jolie and Loxley Andres from the Transkei. There was also Kaya Biko, the older brother of Stephen Bantu, from Ginsburg in King Williamstown. This group of students was only in their late teens. Older students in their early 20s included Archie Squaia, Mabuya Ndingi, and Nqamande Sitsamba, who propagated teachings on the PAC ideology during Wiseman's first year at Lovedale. The government was effectively criminalizing all political activity of this younger generation of Africans and was intent on putting them away from the society. At the end of June, when the trial of Lovedale students was looming, the police had recorded the arrests of 3,246 PAC members. The majority of these arrests had only been made since April, in the 3 months of crackdown after the leaks. By July 1962, the Lovedale students' trial had assumed imminence. In that month, the police had arrested Neville Alexander, formerly a key member of the NUM, who had broken ranks and formed his own underground Yi Chi Chan Club. He and 10 others were indicted under the sabotage law, which allowed for 90-day detention without trial and defined sabotage broadly enough to include strike action, also interpreting it as a capital crime. In 1965, Robert Langstone, an executive secretary of the Neville Alexandra Defense Committee, would write a heart-rending article on apartheid arrests and related harassments, specifically relating to the Alexander case. Langstone also devoted attention to the 1963 Lovedale schoolboy group of Wiseman that was cruelly indicted under the Suppression of Communism Act. That indictment did not make sense to Wiseman and his fellow accused. To begin with, some of them who had come out of the PAC philosophy were not communists. Their main concerns were the effect of colonialism and dispossession, and that they were being oppressed by a white government because they were black. Unlike the communists, they took religion, especially Christianity, very seriously. That they were charged under the Suppression of Communism Act was a mystery to them. In point of fact, although that act was originally directed at outlawing the Communist Party of South Africa, its application eventually carried a wider remit, defining the term communism so extensively that it could include almost any non-parliamentary political opposition. Activities arranged by organizations or even study groups, as was the case in Lovedale, could be prohibited on the grounds that they were deemed to be intending political, industrial, social, or economic change by promotion of disturbance and disorder. Moreover, the Act also gave power to the Minister of Justice to place restrictions on or to ban any person considered to be engaged in communist activities. Through this Act, a large number of well-known politicians were restricted from participation in political activities, among them Albert Luthuli, Nelson Mandela, Moses Kotane, Oliver Tambo, Yusuf Dadoo, Walter Sisulu, Betty du Toit, and Joe Slovo. Realizing the seriousness of the charge, the parents of Wiseman and his fellow accused had managed to secure the legal services of Louis Mchizana, one of the top lawyers in the Eastern Cape. Mchizana had also studied at Lovedale. By the time he was drawn into the Lovedale schoolboys case, he had already defended many people charged with political crimes. He himself was politically connected. At some stage, he was the chairman of the East London branch of the Soya and had strong links to the NUM. So not surprisingly, his political credentials made him persona non grata to the police. He was quick to spot the Achilles heel of the state's case against Wiseman and his fellow accused, realizing that the state would find it hard to prove individual membership of political organizations, despite the students having attended some organized ANC or PAC meetings. Although they had attended meetings, they were not officially members. Perhaps that lulled the accused into a false sense of security, since they didn't see any misconduct on their part in having undergone political education at Lovedale. As Wiseman said, "We felt that the case against us was weak. Membership could not be proved. We thought we could answer on attending meetings as curious students who just go and listen to a speech." A malevolent trial. Mchizana was well aware of the gravity of the state's charges. So were the church denominations, especially the Anglicans and the Catholics, who extended financial and moral support to students from families belonging to the respective churches. The Nkutlu family was not a member of these denominations, and Wiseman's parents had to eke out legal fees from their precarious savings. The two churches took a very strong stand against the indictment, and that at least rallied some members of the public to support the accused, although support alone could not topple the state's intention to proceed with the legal charges. In court, Mchizana advised the young accused of their right to refuse to answer certain questions. He aimed to call each one of them as witness in presenting the defense's case. However, his advice to the accused was, in the opinion of the state, attempting to defeat the ends of justice, and for that supposed crime he was rebuked with a 2-year prison sentence, with leave to appeal. The state delayed its decision on the appeal, and in the meantime also placed him under banning orders. This effectively removed Mchizana from the case and left Wiseman and his fellow accused in a vulnerable position. The prosecution team flexed its muscle when the trial finally resumed. The state's case focused solely on proving the political activity of the accused in the course of studying in Lovedale. And the substitute lawyer was intimidated into abandoning Mchizana's early strategy that protected legitimate rights of the accused not to answer certain questions. The proceedings were thereafter swift and precise, pinning each one of the accused to their participation in the Lovedale political activities. Wiseman recalls the simplicity, especially regarding the line of questioning. For me, one of the devastating things about the trial was when I appeared in the witness box. When they asked me whether I attended those political meetings, I said yes. I was expecting more interrogation, but that was it. They just said I must sit down. I thought, what was happening here? It did not bother the prosecution team that it couldn't prove individual membership of the accused to the political organizations. Details of their registration to these parties did not exist anyway. Instead, a few of their classmates, including Suguma Spike, pseudonym, served as state witnesses and were ordered to testify to the numerous occasions on which the accused had attended political gatherings. That was even more menacing for Wiseman because he had previously attended numerous gatherings, some organized by the PAC and others by the ANC elsewhere, including in his hometown of Qala. And throughout his trial, he was in constant fear of his name being linked to other political congregations. At the end of August, the verdict was shattering. They were all convicted. Sentence ranged from 2 to 3 years incarceration. Wiseman received the longest, 3 years. Only Fumbata Mlenge, the youngest of the group, received an exceptional 18 months. Amid the ensuing anguish, both the Anglican and Roman Catholic churches took up the challenge to start an appeal against the sentences, mainly on behalf of those students who belonged to their denominations. Ezra Disana and Kaya Biko were affiliated to the Anglican Church, and Quadram Joli's family was affiliated to the Catholic Church. Later, the appeal was extended to the broad group of the sentenced Lovedale students. For the next 14 months, their appeal case received support from Father L. Red Stubbs of the Anglican Church, who was also part of the Ecumenical Federal Theological Seminary, FEDSEM, established in 1963 at the Fort Hare site in Alice. But the appeal did not prevent Wiseman and his fellow students from being thrown into prison.
That was another episode of A Life of Purpose, second edition, written by Luvuyo Wachela and Lumkile Wiseman Kuhlu. The book is available online on www.kmmr.co.za, KMMR Publishers, and in all leading bookstores countrywide. It is broadcast on SAFM at 11:45 Monday to Thursday on The Talking Point. It is produced for the station by Vovi Patala, read by Lerato Mvelase, Technical production, Wiseman Manqele and Nanda Koza.
Ashraf Garda on SAFM.
I mean, who would you like to share a seat at the table with? Like someone you've never sat with, but you'd love to?
Wow, gosh, I can't imagine. Probably the president of Nigeria, because I'd love to really ask, what's wrong with South Africa and Nigeria, and how can we get it right?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, as someone who does lots of public speaking myself, emceeing, program directing, I'm always drawn to people who are so articulate, and you've always been that. I mean, how have you developed that presence?
Really, I think it's just that I've had so many opportunities, but secondly, I prepare. I don't just speak. I'm pretty fussy about what I'm going to say in public.
How would Naledi Pandor like to be remembered?
That I sought to serve our country and our people, and I never blemished the name of my family.
Naledi Pandor.
The National Pulse with Ashraf Garda. Weekdays, 3 to 6 p.m. SAFM has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Under the code, we are committed to giving news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that is not harmful, does not amount to hate speech, or contain violence or explicit sex. If you think we are not living up to that code, then you can inform the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Direct any complaints in writing to the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. PO Box 142365. Craig Hall 2024. Fax to 011-326-3198 or an email to bccsa@nabsa.co.za. For more information, please visit www.bccsa.co.za.
The top stories at midday. The death toll rises in the Western Cape bus crash, and almost 60% of Africa's youth considers emigrating. A very good afternoon. Authorities say the death toll in the fatal bus crash on the Van Rys Pass near Nieuwoudtville in the Western Cape has risen to 10. Traffic and SAPS officials are still on site. According to reports, the bus was transporting 42 construction workers from the Northern Cape to the Western Cape. The Provincial Mobility Department says that 29 people were injured in the single vehicle crash, the cause of which is being investigated. The South African economy is showing some resilience in the second quarter, in line with analysts' expectations. Data released by Stats SA shows that the country's economy grew by 0.4% in the second quarter from a revised 0% in the first. Police are investigating the possibility that some of the killings that the 6 suspects who died in a shootout with the police in Durban were involved in may be connected to rivalries between gangs. The suspects opened fire on the police when they arrived at the holiday accommodation that the gang was staying in near the Durban beachfront. They were suspected of murdering at least 2 groups of people in the Durban metro since Friday, as well as a business robbery. Police spokesperson Robert Netsunda says the suspects were allegedly also extorting money from people.
We believe that there are rival gangs that are also fighting each other. Because in the incident in Hammersdale, we are led to believe that the people who were killed are also part of another group that extort money from businesses. So it could be that they are fighting for the theft, drugs as well.
The Gauteng government says it is relieved that MPL Muiponi Mhlongo, who was allegedly hijacked and abducted in Ekurhuleni yesterday, has been found safe. Mhlongo is one of the youngest members of the legislature and the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Education. The Community Safety Portfolio Committee says that the circumstances around Mhlongo's alleged abduction and hijacking remain unclear. Chairperson Bandile Masuku has commended the swift effort by law enforcement agencies, which he says contributed in bringing this traumatic event to a peaceful end.
The unprecedented rise in violent crime, including extortion, armed robberies and hijack, continue to create an atmosphere of fear and insecurity that no longer be ignored in our community. It is for this reason that the committee would like to resuscitate the discussion around the declaration of the state of emergency to empower government to deploy additional resources to support the police in combating crime effectively.
The fire burning in the mountains of the Garden Route National Park is still active, but SANParks says an overnight counter burn was successful and all trigger points have been safeguarded. SANParks spokesperson JP Lowe says the risk of damage to infrastructure and commercial plantations has been averted. He says it crossed the Groot Rivier and will burn up north where it is supposed to burn. Rain is also predicted for tomorrow, and firefighting teams hope that it will assist in dousing the fire. The fire was caused by a lightning strike, and efforts to control it include counterburns and aerial water bombing. And a new poll conducted in 16 countries has revealed that almost 60% of young people in Africa are considering emigrating. The 2024 African Youth Survey found unchecked corruption to be the single biggest factor for wanting to leave, as well as poor job prospects. Ivo Ichikovic is from the foundation that commissioned the report.
Corruption trumps everything else as what is perceived to be the biggest deterrent to growth, development and the lifestyle that the African youth see for themselves. And I think the message the youth are giving us is that they've had enough.
The top story at midday, authorities say the death toll in the fatal bus crash on the Van Ryn Pass near Nieuwoudtville in the Western Cape has risen to 10. For SAFM News, Gemudupima Khalemeli.
Update at noon with Sakina Kamwendo, midday to 1 p.m. Update at noon with Sakina Kamwendo.
Thanks, Mudupi. 5 minutes after 12. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Update at Noon. Thanks so much for tuning in. And of course, just taking a quick look at our diary this afternoon. As you heard there in the news, Stats SA publishing the second quarter GDP figures today, and some growth, 0.4% for the second quarter. I'd like to hear your views on that. So we'll also look at a few other stories that are bouncing about. Six suspects linked to extortion cases and multiple murders were shot and killed during a shootout with police in South Beach in Durban around midnight yesterday. And KwaZulu-Natal police say that the suspects were understood to have been linked to the murders of 4 people in Marion Hill on Sunday evening and another 3 men in Mpumalanga Township on Friday. So we'll follow up just to see if there are any further developments, because this morning there was talk about trying to locate the person who had actually paid for the rental of that particular apartment that the shootout took place in. And so we'll find out if there have been any further developments. And of course, a few bus crashes, some serious ones over the past week or so. The latest, 9 people dying in a bus crash on the Van Ryn Pass between Nieuwoudtville and Van Rensdorp in the Western Cape, as you just heard. And we're also watching Action SA briefing the media on strategic litigation against the IEC. Now, in January, Action SA wrote to the IEC Chief Executive for Party Funding, George Mahlangu, seeking an investigation in terms of Section 14 of the Party Funding Act into the ANC's conspicuous settlement of an over 102 million rand debt with Ezulweni Investments. So they were having a briefing about that. We'll try and bring you up to speed with the latest there. And today also the MK parties 10, those members of parliament who unfortunately were kicked out. Remember, they launched an urgent interdict to prevent the swearing in of their replacements, and that case being heard in the Western Cape High Court today. The 10 are seeking an interdict until there's an outcome on their review application, because they say that their resignation letters were forged. And I saw in one of the papers this morning, I think it was the Star, where the MK president, Jacob Zuma, was saying that they could not prove their membership of the party. So interesting developments on that front as well. And also, as I said, in the courts, we'll keep an eye on some of those stories playing out in the courts. And the Department of Community Safety and Liaison, along with the police, are going to raid some troublesome schools in the Masoi area. Now, according to the department, these schools were identified by the Department of Education as troublesome schools. We'll try and catch up with Mutsibi Wamunareng to find out what the latest is from there. So those some of the stories that we're tracking at this hour.
Update at noon, midday to 1 p.m.
Now, South Africa's gross domestic product increased by 0.4% in the second quarter of 2024, and this follows a 0% growth in the first quarter of 2024. The finance, real estate and business services industries increased by 1.3%, contributing 0.3% of a percentage point to GDP growth. Now, increased economic activity was reported for financial intermediation, auxiliary activities, real estate activities, and other business services. The Chief Director for National Accounts at Stats SA, Bokang Vumbugani Dipolisa, had this to say.
On the production side of the economy, 7 of the 10 industries recorded positive growth. The finance industry made the biggest positive impact, adding 0.3 of a percentage point to overall GDP growth. Other notable contributors include manufacturing, trade in electricity, gas and water. Manufacturing production increased by 1.1%, mainly driven by motor vehicles and transport equipment in food and beverages. A rise in economic activity in wholesale trade, retail trade and tourism accommodation pushed the trade industry higher by 1.2%. The country experienced no load shedding in the second quarter, which helped the electricity, gas and water supply industry. It grew by 3.1%, driven by increased electricity generation and consumption, as well as water distribution. Not all was good news. 3 industries contracted in the second quarter. These include transport, storage and communication, agriculture and mining. Land transport and transport support services weighed negatively on the transport industry. The agriculture industry reported decreased production of field crops and animal products. The mining sector was affected by decreased economic activities for iron ore, coal, diamonds, and gold.
And that was Bokam Vubugani Lipolisa, the Chief Director for National Accounts at Stats SA. So to help us unpack this data, we join on the line now by Chief Economist at the Bureau for Economic Research, Lisette Iso the Skipper. Thanks so much for your time and welcome to Update at Noon.
Hi, good afternoon.
So Lisette, firstly, looking at the data, does this indicate that South Africa has avoided a recession?
Yes, we have avoided a recession. We expanded by 0.4% quarter on quarter. So it's not fast growth, but it is growth. The other good news was that the first quarter data, where we had that 0.1% contraction, was now upwardly revised to no growth. So even the contraction in the first quarter was now revised away.
So obviously the question then is, moving forward, what is it that needs to be done to unlock real growth and allow the economy to grow faster and create more jobs, I suppose, more importantly?
Yeah, I think what we hoped for is that the lack of load shedding would on its own provide a somewhat bigger boost to growth. Of course, you can tell a story that growth would have been worse if it was for load shedding still during this time. But beyond this, what we need to see is increased sentiment, increased confidence about the South African economy. And what we need for that to translate is a continued pursuit of structural reform aimed at taking away the constraints on doing business in South Africa and on the South African economy. So load shedding was one big step, and has been, the lack of load shedding rather, has one big step. But we know, for example, the logistics sector is still struggling and still a big drag on growth. What we also know is that the South African consumer is under significant pressure. They added positively to GDP growth in the second quarter, but they remain under pressure. Higher interest rates, inflation was still a bit higher. With that hopefully turning around in coming months, they should also provide a bigger boost to growth going forward.
Lucette, speaking about the ease of doing business in South Africa, so where do you think government can improve?
I think the importance is to make it easier and to make it cheaper to do business in South Africa. And not cheaper necessarily in rand and cent terms, but when it comes to the administrative difficulty of sometimes running a business. If that would be lowered and if that would be easier to do business, so less interference from government almost, so that the businesses can take it from there, setting up the environment that is conducive to growth.
Give us a practical example of that, of a situation right now that could be seen as low-hanging fruit where government could intervene and make it easier for people to invest and do business in South Africa.
I think a very low-hanging fruit that is spoken a lot about of late is around the tourism sector. If we could have better visa, if it would be easier for people to get a visa to South Africa. I mean, the question is whether they should, in the first place, require a visa to visit South Africa. That would really help with the tourism sector, would help with investment in the tourism sector. It's a sector that would earn us foreign exchange as well, which is usually beneficial. So that really is a low-hanging fruit that would have multiple advantages and multiple spillovers throughout the entire economy. When it comes to other sectors, we know the intention is often there, but then the final service delivery fails at a very local level. So addressing the local municipal service delivery would go a long way in making it easier to do business in South Africa.
So just, by way of helping us understand, when you speak about the visa regime in South Africa and saying that, asking the question as to why would people require a visa, why not? Because those are required of us as South Africans when we visit various countries.
For sure, and you can debate. I'm not saying that we should drop all visas for visitors to South Africa, but it should at least be easier to obtain a visa. It shouldn't be a process that takes months. If it can be done online, it should be able to do, we should be able to do it online. We don't have to do what is being done to us if it could be beneficial for growth in South Africa. So I'm certainly not saying that a visa regime should be completely deregulated or let go, but I am saying that any way we can make it easier for people to visit our country, to see our country, to invest in our country, we should really try to pursue that.
And just finally, do you believe that we have seen the worst of the downturn in our economy at this stage?
I do think so, yeah. Our forecast for next year is a lot more optimistic than for this year. I think this year was still a tough, very tough first quarter. While there was no load shedding, the logistical constraint weighed very heavily on the economy. You see it in the trade data as well. So next year, things should hopefully look a little bit better, lower interest rates, somewhat faster consumer spending as a result of that. Hopefully, improved sentiment among business people will fuel a bit of an uptick in investment, which has been performing very poorly of late. And that should get you on a better footing in 2025 relative to 2024.
Lisette, thanks so much for your time. Lisette Isel de Skipper, the Chief Economist at the Bureau for Economic Research.
Sakina Kamwendo on SAFM.
17 minutes after 12 now. Only 25% of South Africa's young people are hopeful about the future being better. That's according to a survey, Johannesburg-based Ichikowitz Family Foundation. And the survey also reveals that the country's youth are much less trustful of all leaders than the rest of the continent's youth, with only religious leaders trusted by a majority. Local community leaders and organizations are seen as the biggest drivers of positive change, while national leaders are seen less positively. For more of this and some of the other key findings of the survey, we join on the line now by Ruben Ichikowitz, who is a trustee of the foundation. Thanks so much for your time, Ruben. Welcome to Update at Noon.
Good afternoon.
Ruben, kindly sum up for us the composition of the sample of the survey and also the age groups of the respondents.
Sure. So the African Youth Survey is run on a biannual basis by our foundation across 16 countries around Africa. This is the third edition of the survey. To date, we have polled 14,000 respondents through face-to-face interviews through 25 countries in total, covering 80 African cities. This year's survey focuses on 16 countries, with South Africa being one that we focused specifically on. We conduct face-to-face interviews with youth between the age of 18 and 24. They're in-depth, personal interactions that are done on an anonymous basis, and then the research is aggregated and polled in partnership with a professional statistics research organization.
So as far as the key focus areas go, Ruben, does the study go beyond optimism and leadership sentiments of young people?
Absolutely. We use this as a barometer to get a pulse check of both the dreams and aspirations of youth, but also some of the harder issues, their views on corruption, their views on democracy, on climate change, on foreign influence as well, to be able to get a 360-degree picture as best as possible.
So how did local South African young people compare to the rest of the continent when it comes to their perspective on future prospects for the country?
So unfortunately, South Africans have a more pessimistic view compared to other African youth in terms of the direction that our country is going. A general theme, interestingly, across all of the countries that we polled is that there is a view that Africa as a continent is generally trending in the right direction to a greater extent elsewhere when compared to their home countries. But even within that sample, South African youth were still in the bottom tier of the most optimistic. I think it's important to note that because of the timing of the survey, it was done just before the Government of National Unity came about. So one of the interesting outcomes that we're looking for is to do a poll, an updated poll, post the GNU to see if that has had any implication on their views of positivity and optimism for the country.
So what lessons do you think can be drawn from these findings of the survey? And that's both for young people themselves and those who run the country.
So I think for young people, there's a resounding sense of motivation and drive and ambition, which is fantastic to tap off into. There's a real sense of an African direction and an African identity, which I think is encouraging. In terms of policy, corruption is the issue that is flagged the most across the board, across the 16 countries that we polled. 66% of youth find that this is the most important and the greatest obstacle to their future. There was a large spike in South Africa of 21% compared to the 2022 edition of the survey, which tells us that South African youth are even more concerned with corruption than they used to be. So I think one of the the key takeaways from a policy maker and the government point of view is to address this fundamental issue and to know that it is at the very top of youth's mind.
And there are some really interesting findings like foreign influence, for example, where you state that across the board, South African youth are significantly more likely, 40% of them, than their counterparts on the continent, 28%, to say that foreign powers are drivers of negative change in their country. And 67% of South Africans are concerned about foreign influence. 79% further suggest that foreign companies have taken advantage of their country's resources without benefiting South Africa's citizenry, which is quite interesting, thinking about, the majority of the citizens are young people, and this is where their heads are at.
We see this as a theme across the continent. There's a strong sense of national pride and a sense that the resources of a country belong to those who live within it. Interestingly, we inserted this question primarily to look at countries that have had historical colonial powers that still maintain significant influence over their economies. And in some of those countries, in West Africa specifically, the views are actually more favorable than they are in South Africa to international in international companies. There's a weird dichotomy because there are other results that come out of the survey in terms of access to jobs and a sense that there are not enough jobs around, and there's not enough investment into building the economy. And of course, we know that foreign direct investment can contribute towards that. So it is an interesting metric that does point to a very strong national drive.
And so are a few others as well. Ruben, we have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time. And of course, I'm sure if you would like to read more about this, you can actually go onto the website to read the entire report. That was Ruben Ichikowitz, who is a trustee of the Ichikowitz Foundation, and looking at the survey and looking at South African youth and using various metrics, looking at how they feel about certain sentiments in terms of leadership, of various things, including terrorism and the like. So interesting to see how young people are thinking.
Update at noon, midday to 1 p.m.
And I must indicate there were, of course, several African countries, youth that participated, 15 countries in total: Angola, Congo, Brazzaville, Democratic Republic of Congo, Ethiopia, Gabon, Ghana, Kenya, Malawi, Mozambique, Nigeria, Rwanda, South Africa, Sudan, Uganda, and Zambia. So those were the youth who were actually spoken to. It's 25 minutes after 12. Now, Action SA says it is currently embarking on strategic litigation against the Independent Electoral Commission, that's the IEC. Now, the party says that in January this year, they wrote to the IEC seeking an investigation in terms of Section 14 of the Party Funding Act into the ANC's conspicuous settlement of an over 102 million rand debt with Ezulwini Investments. But for more on this, we joined on the line by Michael Beaumont, Action SA's national chairperson. Michael, good afternoon. Welcome to Update at Noon.
Thank you very much, Sakina. Always good to speak with you.
Michael, in simple terms, what actually is Action SA pursuing with regard to the IEC and this matter?
Well, we're looking at a debt settlement agreement which was announced in December last year after a period of time in which the ANC was unable to even pay the salaries of striking workers, where somehow they managed to settle a 102 million rand debt settlement agreement plus interest at a time in which they had disclosures of donations amounting to only 10 million rand. I think the viewpoint is there's no way that that settlement agreement could have been done at a market-related rate and in a manner which is compliant with the Party Funding Act, And we've asked the IEC to investigate this issue. We are concerned that the IEC has not dealt with us in good faith, because despite indicating that they were addressing the matter in terms of the Act in March, the correspondence of yesterday indicated that they have never regarded there to be a prima facie case to investigate here. And we are concerned that the hard-won victory by our constitutional court for voters to have transparency in the funding of political parties is being undermined by the manner in which the IEC is interpreting its mandate.
So, as it stands, this is the question that you've put to the IEC regarding the ANC. But is it only the ANC, or are there other parties that you also, are wishing the IEC to have a look at in terms of their compliance with the Party Funding Act?
It is only the ANC in as much as the complaint has risen to the stage where we need to litigate. But we have initiated a complaint with the IEC as recently as yesterday into two political parties, the EFF and the MK party, whose disclosures since the beginning of the 2022 financial year amount to 3.5 million rand and 380,000 rand respectively. Two amounts that fundamentally do not explain the hundreds of millions of rands these two parties have expended during the election campaign. And we contend, too, that the IEC cannot drive to work with their blinkers on and ignore the millions of rands spent by a political party on billboards and posters and rallies at F&B Stadium, and then in the same breath accept that all of that was funded by those disclosed amounts. That cannot be how the IEC operates in its responsibilities in the Funding Act.
So what's the way forward now?
Well, we are going to proceed to court to apply for the IEC's record of decision as it relates to the Izilweni investments matter. In other words, they would have to supply us with the documentation and evidence upon which they based their decision not to investigate. As a public institution, they are held accountable to act rationally and reasonably, and we contend that they haven't. And that record of decision will allow us to prove that particular case. As it relates to the case before the EFF and MK, we must afford the IEC the space and time, having only initiated this complaint yesterday, so that they can follow due process before we consider our next steps in those regards.
Any reason why you are not wanting this to be applied universally, looking at all parties?
Well, certainly, that is most certainly the requirement that it must be. But what we are doing is focusing in on the political parties whose campaigns most fundamentally are not explained by their revenue. Those are the political parties that we have identified. As an organization, we're a new organization, relatively young. We don't have the resources to litigate against that number of entities. But from our point of contention, these are the organizations that we believe have the most to answer for. But what we hope, Sakina, is that this is going to generate a conversation in South Africa that can be taken forward about how seriously we take the issue of transparency, because as a country, we obsess about the donations that are being disclosed, but no one's asking questions about the donations that are not being disclosed.
Michael Bowman, thanks so much. Action SA's national chairperson there. And as you heard, they will be moving forward in terms of trying to get records from the IEC to see exactly how they dealt with the initial complaint that was brought to them by Action SA. And of course, they will be given space to do the two subsequent ones into EFF funding and MK Party. Let us know your thoughts as well. And with that, it's 12:30. Here's Cathy Mohlahlana with your latest headlines.
Thank you very much, SK, and a very good afternoon. In your headlines this hour, the Western Cape's Mobility Minister has confirmed that the people involved in a bus accident on the Van Rys Pass outside Van Heidtsdorp on the west coast are construction workers from Uppington in the Northern Cape. The South African economy is showing some resilience in the second quarter, in line with analysts' expectations, and the former chief executive of Volkswagen, Martin Winterkom, is set to go on trial today for his role in the emissions scandal. Details of these and other stories, 1 o'clock.
Economic news on SAFM. Facts and figures you can count on.
The rand's trading at 17 rand 88 cents to the US dollar, 23 rand 45 to the pound sterling, and 19 rand 74 to the euro. The euro trading at $1.10 and the dollar's at 145 yen 82. In Brazil, 1 US dollar trading at 5 real 61. In Russia at 88 rubles 70. In India, 83 rupees 92. And in China, 1 US dollar will buy you 7 yuan 11. Markets in India, or rather Asia, ended weaker today. Hong Kong's Hang Seng dropped by 0.1%. Mainland China's Shanghai Index down 0.3%. Japan's Nikkei ended flat, and India's markets also flat at the close of trade. The JSE mixed at midday. The All-Share Index has fallen 0.2% to 83,278. The Industrials 25 Index slightly lower. Financials flat at the moment. Top 10 Resources Index has dropped 0.7%, and the Precious Metals and Mining Index 0.3% higher. On the capital market, the yield on the R186 government bond is at 8.16%, and the yield on the R2030 at 9.15%. Markets in Europe, they mainly weaker at this hour. Britain's FTSE 100 is flat. The CAC 40 in France 0.1% firmer, and Germany's DAX off 0.1%. Looking at commodities, gold trading at $2,503 per fine ounce. Platinum's at $923 per ounce, and the price of Brent crude oil at this hour $77.07 a barrel.
Update at noon with Sakina Kamwendo, midday to 1 p.m.
Now, the Standing Committee on Public Accounts, SCOPA, was scheduled to be briefed by the National Skills Fund and the National Student Financial Aid Scheme on developments emanating from the 2022-2023 annual reports of the entities and on investigations currently being conducted by the Special Investigating Unit on the entities. Now, in February, the SIU said it had recovered more than 688 million rand from institutions of higher learning belonging to the National Student Financial Aid Scheme. And for more on this, we join on the line now by Chairperson of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts, Songezo Zibi. Mr. Zibi, thanks for your time. Welcome to Updated Noon.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for having me.
Mr. Zibi, in February this year, the SIU said they had recovered a staggering almost 700 million rand on behalf of the National Student Financial Aid Scheme. So they were reporting to you again today. Were you satisfied with progress made since then?
No, we had to adjourn the meeting before we started because the Deputy Minister of Higher Education, Mr. Cathy Mohlahlana, elected not to come at the last minute. And we want to be clear that we expect the executive to account directly to Parliament. The minister was not here, but with good reason. She is traveling with the president in China. We accepted her apology. The deputy minister was forwarded to us as a person who would come. From what we've seen of the Department of Higher Education's program for the ministry, Mr. Mohlahlana was supposed to be in Parliament today, and he chose not to come less than an hour before the hearing. And we are not going to entertain it at all. So we have rescheduled the hearing so that either the minister or Mr. Mohlahlana can account directly to Parliament.
And of course, this is my first time speaking to you since being appointed chairperson of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts, Mr. Zibi. And how has that portfolio been for you?
No, we actually beginning to do our work now. This was our first ministerial hearing because Parliament has been in an induction period, inducting the MPs, inducting the chairs of the committees, drawing up the program and so on. And we have a busy schedule between now and the 18th of October. We were supposed to have the Deputy Minister today. Tomorrow is the Auditor General and SIU to brief us on their investigations, Transnet next week, etc., etc. So, this is disappointing, obviously, but we're beginning to get onto the business end of our work now. And this was our first big engagement.
There has been a perception previously that perhaps SCOPA is not punitive enough when it comes to matters such as no-shows before your committee. What's your take on that? And given what had happened today, how will you be responding to this?
Look, I can't comment on previous SCOPAs. I can only talk about what's happening with our committee. We had to take a decision about whether we continue with acting officials or not, and we felt we need to send a very strong message. I'll be doing two things. The first is I am writing to the Minister of Higher Education to inform her of what happened today and to express our disappointment and that we are rescheduling the meeting and give her a new date so that either he or she or Deputy Minister Manamela can come. I am also writing to the Deputy President as a leader of government business to ensure that either the minister or the deputy minister shows up in Parliament. If that does not work, we will be left with no choice but to subpoena the minister to appear, which is a power that Parliament has.
Mr. Zibi, we'll leave it there and, of course, follow up as these sittings happen. Thanks so much for your time this afternoon. Songezo Zibi, the chairperson of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts.
SAFM Sport with John Gerika.
Hello.
Has it?
Ah, okay.
Busy morning this morning.
Yeah, it's only Tuesday.
Yeah. I've been watching sport this morning. Somebody's got to do it, hey?
Of course.
Paralympic Games action started bright and early this morning. 9:30 in the men's 100-meter backstroke S7 heats. Christian Sadie finished third in his heat. He's booked a spot in this evening's final with the 6th fastest time overall. In the women's 50-meter backstroke S5 heat, Kat Swanepoel set an African record, a time of 49.63 seconds, but placed 6th in her heat. Her time was 10th overall, though she missed out on a place in the final. The men's 200-meter individual medley SM13 heat was this morning. Nathan Hendricks placed 4th in his race, booked a place in the final as the 8th fastest qualifier. That final is at 20 to 8 this evening. On the track this morning, Tesna Kirsten Abrahams ran a personal best time of 31.1 seconds in the women's 200-meter T64. She placed 5th in the heat. Only the top 3 in each heat advanced to the final, though. On the go, boccia, the mixed pairs. South Africa's mixed pairs are up against Brazil at the moment. Brazil leading 2-0 after the first end. And then we play Greece later on today at 5. So the one other athletics final tonight is the women's 400-meter T37 final. Liesel Gous and Cheryl James are in that final. Cheryl James probably a medal favourite to win there, or to at least get a medal there. Let's go to football news. South Africa preparing for their AFCON qualifier. It's against Uganda in Orlando on Friday. Yesterday, coach Hugo Bruce gave an update on his squad and his preparations.
I think we can be very happy with the results of Bafana. We made a very good AFCON bronze medal. After that, friendly game against Algeria, very good. The games against Zimbabwe and Nigeria for the World Cup qualifiers also, we did very good results. So that means that, we are confident and we believe in ourselves to start those qualifiers for AFCON 2025.
Tickets are $60. You can get them on Ticket Pro. In Springbok news, Springbok scrum coach Don Himon faced the media yesterday. Asked if the South Africans are worried about a New Zealand backlash this weekend in Cape Town, Himon had this to say.
Yeah, they had a massive comeback after that first set that they lost against Argentina. You can always expect that from a quality side like them. Like I said, they're a world-class side. And like 2 or 3 years ago, we can expect the same from them coming back this week again. Probably trying to do the same thing. But I think at the moment we're actually concentrating on ourselves where we can get better.
In the US Open, Arthur Ashe Stadium today, Paula Badosa takes on Emma Navarro in the opening match. Taylor Fritz against Alexander Zverev. These are quarterfinals, by the way. Qinwen Zheng takes on Arina Sabalenka, and Gregor Dimitrov meets Francis Tiafoe. Let's hear from Dimitrov.
Every match that you play, it gets tougher and tougher, and I think I'm far from satisfied. I think from my performance, I really believe I can play a better tennis. Yes, I'm winning matches, and those are the matches that I really want to win when I'm not at my best. So I want my base level to be enough to get to these positions, and that's what I've been doing. But as I said, every match I need to stay very grounded and look after my game, and of course improve, because again, every match is not going to be an easy match.
Second test between Pakistan and Bangladesh went into the fifth day. Bangladesh winning by 6 wickets, chasing down the 185 they needed with 4 wickets down. The Vuelta today, stage 16 of the Tour of Spain, a long 181-kilometre stage with 2 Category 1 climbs in the middle. It's dangerous. The final climb over 13 kilometres includes some really steep ramps, so expect a change at the front of the race. In other news, Uruguay icon Luis Suarez has announced his retirement from international football. He'll hang up his boots following Friday's World Cup qualifier against Paraguay in Montevideo. He's played 69, or scored 69 goals from 142 appearances for Uruguay. Now, there are 24 FA Cup qualifying replays happening this evening, and I thought we'd focus this afternoon on Matlock Town FC for no particular reason. Currently bottom of the table in the Northern Premier League Premier Division, the 7th and 8th level of English football. Their nickname is the Gladiators. They come up against Spalding United in a replay at the 2,300-seater Proctor Carr Stadium today. It was founded in 1878, the club. They are having a manager crisis at the moment, though. They're just parted ways with manager Nicky Law by mutual consent. So the club's under-21 coach, James Holmes, will be in charge of the team. Where is Matlock, you ask? Well, imagine a map of England. If you throw a dart and it lands in the middle of England, that will be Matlock. It couldn't be more central if you tried.
Wow.
By the way, yesterday's featured club, St Ives, we spoke about, they beat Harpenden down 5-2 yesterday.
Whoa.
And they're the favourites to beat Berkhamsted in the quarterfinals of the qualifier.
Go St Ives.
Yeah, St Ives. And finally, Turkey's Olympic pistol sharpshooter. You know the man, Yusuf Dikic, has filed a trademark for his nonchalant stance at the Paris Games that went viral around the world. His coach says the move to protect the commercial use of his pose with the Turkish Patent and Trademark Office came in response to others trying to trademark it without his say-so. So apparently there's cups and T-shirts and a whole lot of things that people are making from that stance, and they trademark it.
That was one of the epic moments of the Olympics.
All these great things. What's the most you're going to remember? The Turkish shooter.
Yeah, I do remember that.
Yeah. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Only the final whistle can reveal who are the real football kings of East Africa. Neighbors won't get along during the East African Derby. This is the Total Energies 2025 Africa Cup of Nations qualifier. Witness the beauty of African football. Tanzania takes on Ethiopia on Wednesday, 4 September at 6 p.m. Live at your fingertips on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Sakina Kamwendo on SAFM.
Right, time to hear your voices. Let's listen to some of the voice notes that you've sent. All right, we'll get there.
Sakina, listening to the young people today who want to leave this country mainly because of corruption, it does absolutely boggle my mind that our Minister of Justice remains in her position. How can it be that somebody who's supposed to uphold the law, supposed to be the pinnacle of honesty, is now being investigated by the NPA, the very organization she's supposed to oversee? But of course, when you have a president who's himself compromised through Parla, how dare he act against somebody else and try and suspend her when he himself hasn't suspended himself? It really, truly is a mess. Mike Newlands.
Good day, Sakina. It's listener here in Krugersdorp. I've heard Solima Paila say the GNU is giving him a sleepless night. No, his fear of losing everything he's got from corruption. Now the gate of corruption is closed. That is why he can't sleep, because of the fear of losing everything he got from the corruption. They are lying, saying that they are fighting for the black poor people, but they are fighting for their stomachs. The GNU is the good option for us to get the jobs and a good economy for this country, not for their stomachs.
And of course, thanks for those. We'll try and load a few more. This one from Ripaka says, Buti Manamela is not surprising that he dodged Parliament today. That man doesn't want to be held accountable for anything, him and all the ANC people. Sewani JCK says, Sakina, government must get their ducks in a row. How can they fight crime if they don't know who's in and out of the country? These are the basics to curb crime, not putting the cart before the horse. Government, wake up. So let's park that there. We'll come back to them as we try to load a few more, and we'll take a few more of your messages in a short while.
Update at noon, midday to 1 p.m.
Now, with a high level of unemployment and saturated job market, are women in South Africa tapping into traditionally male-dominated industries? Yes, they are, more so. And over the last years, Limpopo has seen a high number of women participating in sectors such as the operations of heavy vehicles and machinery, as well as construction. As South Africa celebrates 30 years of democracy, we take a look at some of the women treading unfamiliar territory. SABC News reporter Vutivi Maluleke has more on this.
For 35-year-old Mukanda Hawu Mugale from Dopeni near Lutrehad, bricklaying has become second nature. The mother of 5 had to fight against stereotypes and develop a thick skin in her path to becoming a bricklayer. Seen as a trait that demands masculinity more than any other attribute, Mugale had to summon a great deal of courage to do what she loves. She is known for her quick and nimble hands, as well as her unwavering dedication to her job. Mugari says abject poverty and a string of other challenges were a driving force behind her decision to venture into the sector.
What made me venture into construction is because I wanted to take care of my children so that I should not be always asking from my siblings and family members. I do bricklaying as well as plastering.
Mugari's brother and mentor Naledzani Mugari says she has been one of the teachable of his students.
When we are working, you can tell that she is dedicated and committed. She is open-minded, and it's easy to guide her on what to do. That's why we hired her to work with us.
Meanwhile, Mukanda Hawu Mugari is encouraging other women to take every opportunity they get.
What I can say to my fellow women is that they should not be choosy when they are looking for a job. I always thought this kind of a job is very tiring until I did it, only to realize that it's just a regular job like any other job where one must be hands-on.
50-year-old Tsakan Masia from Masia village near Thoyandou is the first black woman in Limpopo to design and build her own 4-star hotel. The construction mogul owns several residential and business properties in the province. Masia started from a humble beginnings as a blanket seller and a broiler chicken breeder. With her strong business prowess and astute vision, she was able to narrow her focus to the construction sector. She says this is a decision that turned her into the most revered female construction and property developers in the country.
Throughout the journey, there were a lot of challenges. But what I did, I decided to do everything with integrity, principles, and resilience. I started building small projects, I started building bigger projects, and I started building bigger student accommodation for ourselves before we were given a responsibility to build this hotel.
Masia has appealed to other women to break the mold and venture into the construction industry.
No matter how difficult things might be, don't give up. You know, for you to be successful or for you to be a greater person, you need to go through challenges. The best is just to do right when all is not right, and to focus, to do everything the way they should be done, to be resilient. You know, as women, there's nothing we cannot do.
According to some women, the challenges they face in the construction industry includes lack of support and mentorship from their male counterparts. They often face sexism, discrimination, and unequal remunerative packages, making it difficult for them to advance in their careers. I'm Vutivi Maluleke, SABC News, Lutrehad.
The Mediterranean Knights are after the big prize, a win in the opener of the AFCON qualifier. But Amavubi differs and insists on traveling back home with a massive bag of 3 points. This is the Total Energies 2025 Africa Cup of Nations qualifier. Witness the beauty of African football. Libya versus Rwanda on Wednesday, 4 September at 6 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4 and SABCSport.com. Brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Sakina Kamwendo on SAFM.
Well, to the courts now, where ballistics expert Colonel Chris Mangena has reiterated that the markings on the test bullets that he fired align with those found from the bullet at the Senzo Mayiwa crime scene. Mangena is back on the witness stand in his cross-examination at the Pretoria High Court, where 5 men are on trial for the 2014 murder of the Bafana Bafana captain. Mangena has also testified that the crime scene bullet was fired from a firearm that was seized from accused number 3, Mtobisi Mncube. And for the latest, we join on the line now by SABC News reporter Pearl Magubane. Pearl, good afternoon. So the matter was postponed in order to allow the defense time to examine new evidence. What evidence are they talking about, or were they talking about, and what has been revealed so far?
Good afternoon, Sakina. Well, this is not necessarily new evidence. However, it was just additions to what was supplied by Chris Mangena, that being the magnified pictures of the markings of the test bullets and the scene bullets as what they have been provided before. There was no clarity as to how Mangena got to making the actual matches. So Nisi felt that he needed those additional documents so that he can examine with the help of their own ballistic expert, and therefore cross-examine him on this matter. And I must say, he does say that their own independent ballistic expert reaches a different conclusion and did not find this match, and therefore saying that Colonel Mangena could have been wrong in his findings.
So what has court heard today apart from that, if anything else, Pearl?
Well, it's been the main issue in terms of looking at the lines or the markings themselves that were from the test bullets. Nisi is saying that why are there only 2 bullets that have visible markings, and basically holding on to the fact that the barrel of the firearm that was seized from Mncube was old and worn out, and therefore the marks were not sufficient, or the markings, were not similar, did not show the similarities. However, Mangena sticks to his testimony, saying that, this is a conclusion he reached, and with the help of 4 other police officers or ballistic experts who are still going to be called when he's done wrapping up his evidence in chief.
Well, speaking of, when is Mangena expected to conclude his testimony, and who's expected to take the stand next, if we know, Pearl?
Yes, we were hoping that after concludes the part of the markings, that's where he's going to end. However, he has now referred back to witness testimony, that of Tumelo Mangena and Zandile Khumalo, of what they saw the night Mayiwa was murdered